talk shows is back. Unleashed, unabridged, uncensored, and unbelievable. Only on Sputnik Radio.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, and as the man just said, the Open University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees and where you are positively encouraged to speak back to the teacher. You can do that by phone on 02077 982 255. I'll give you it again, 02077 982 255. Or you can tweet us at George Galloway, at RTUK News. You can also leave a video message. We had the first one of those last week on the first show. You just Skype GG MOATS, that's GGMOATS. We are here for the next 3 hours, reaching across the globe on all kinds of platforms. I promise you, this really is the mother of all talk shows.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Now, I don't know where you were when you got the news that the very first ever United States president had set foot in North Korea, or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, to give it its Sunday name. Well, I was in Donald Trump's bed. Not his actual bed, but a bed owned by him at the Trump Turnberry Hotel in Ayrshire in Scotland, where I was attending a very special 60th birthday celebration in honour of my good friend David, and thrown and organised, fantastic it was, by his good wife, wonderful wife, Rosalind. So there I was, propped up on these duck-down pillows. I tell you, you've never slept on a pillow till you've slept on one owned by Donald Trump, watching Donald Trump walking across that little bridge and giving a hug to the little rocket man, who just over a year ago, he was threatening to eviscerate in a hail of missiles, some of which would have been nuclear missiles. I know it's had a mixed response. I see that a number of the US Democratic presidential hopefuls are showering down abuse on Trump for meeting the leader of North Korea. For me, I absolutely approve of it. The more leaders meeting more often, shaking hands and talking, jaw instead of war, and the threat of war, the better. And I'll go further. I thought Donald Trump had not a bad week at the G20, strutting around like he owned the place, as of course he would like to do, but that was then. Now is now. He no longer owns the G20, but he acted as if he did. But he did some good things. He called off the trade war with the People's Republic of China and opened the door to Huawei, don't you know? That Gavin Williamson is back in politics. He's the British government minister, defence minister no less, who lost his job over the Huawei affair. So all the tables have turned. Huawei, we're now allowed. Anybody got a Huawei, they can sell me. They're now back in the game, at least temporarily. But temporarily is better than nothing at all. He had good talks with President Putin, the Russian leader, and that's a good thing too. After all, everyone in Europe is getting extremely exercised by the presence of short and medium-ranged missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads that the Russians have deployed. But the Russians have only deployed them because Donald Trump withdrew from the very treaty that forbade their deployment. It's Kafkaesque, actually. You break the treaty and then you blame the other fellow for the consequences of it. If that sounds familiar, that's exactly what's happened in relation to the Iran nuclear deal, which of course would also have featured, not just in the discussions, between President Putin and President Trump, but I expect all the leaders, including the European leaders, who definitely don't want war with Iran, which in any case seems to have receded a little. If you're picking up a pattern here, it's this, that Trump is full of wind and fury. His language is extremely aggressive, belligerent, bellicose, but actually he's killed a lot less people than President Hillary Clinton would have done. He has killed a lot less people than President Barack Obama actually did. So call me a man of shrunken expectations, but I'll settle for boorish bullying and browbeating rather than the hail of missiles crunching down on people's heads. Not that Trump hasn't done some of that, and he has facilitated much of that in the war in Yemen and indeed upon the heads of the Palestinian people. And no doubt these are issues to which we will return. And I note that the next G20 is in what they call the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but it's actually run by the Crown Prince. And Trump hailed the bone saw murderer, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the man who chopped up into pieces my old friend, the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. That should have gone down like a lead balloon in the United States. But I don't actually see much static from the usual suspects, from the Liberal Brigade. They're not so much interested in what happened to Jamal. They're only interested in throwing brickbats at President Trump. So I personally think if you were reviewing the week, you'd give him 6 out of 10, maybe edging up towards a 7. Tell me what you think. 02077 982 255. Of course, the Democratic Party are limbering up to run against President Trump in 2020. And the Democratic Party, as we foreshadowed last week, had not one, but 2 sets of hustings. We'll be talking to an expert guest, Casandra Fairbanks, on how those debates went. Who's up, who's down, who won, who lost. I did see Joe Biden, the man that Hillary Clinton and the rest of the Democratic establishment almost certainly want to win, looking rather disturbingly like a waxwork dummy and talking not much more eloquently than a waxwork dummy would do. Here on this side of the pond, well, I'm afraid that the big story of the week was the lifting of the suspension on a rather important Labour opposition member of Parliament, Chris Williamson, followed 24 hours later by his re-suspension. And it looks to me like he's a goner, because Labour parties will, in the next 11 days now, begin to select, or at least pave the way for the selection of their candidates for a general election. So it may very well be that as a Labour MP, we've seen the last of Chris Williamson. Now, full disclosure, although I don't know him personally very well, I have been tremendously impressed by the work that Chris Williamson has been doing over these last 4 years. If I put it to you this way, if you're not part of our British audience, but you are listening internationally, Chris Williamson is the MP most supportive, most publicly, of the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. And that's probably why he's now been put out. But he also toured the country on a democracy roadshow, effectively trying to encourage constituency Labour parties, the local Labour parties, to know their rights where it came to replacing MPs that had spent the last 4 years undermining their own party, undermining the leader, Jeremy Corbyn, because their allegiance remained almost entirely with the former leader, Tony Blair, formerly of this parish. Most of you in the world will know the death and destruction that he caused throughout the world. But believe it or not, he's still got more than 100 Labour members of Parliament on his leash. And he unleashes them with regularity to attack the actual now leader of the Labour Party. Their weapon of choice should also be familiar across the Atlantic. The weapon of choice is false allegations of anti-Semitism. Now, I said to you I don't know Chris Williamson well, but I know his public record very, very well. Chris Williamson has never said or done a single anti-Semitic thing in his entire life. He's a man of the left. And what they really mean by anti-Semitism is anti-Israelism. What they really mean is somebody standing up for the Palestinian people, somebody questioning Netanyahu rigorously, forensically, and unrelentingly. And this was foretold on this very show when it was on another platform by Dr. Norman Finkelstein, Professor Norman Finkelstein, who said that what was happening to Labour on the subject of anti-Semitism would be used as a trial run for the very same attack on Senator Sanders, should he be the Democratic Party's candidate. And that struck me at the time as being almost certainly true. And it has come true. The very things they say about Corbyn and Labour, they're saying about Representative Ilhan Omar and other members of the US Congress. They're saying about Bernie Sanders, although he is himself Jewish, and that's before he's got the gig. If Bernie were to win the nomination, and or if he were to run as a third-party candidate, be ready for the Jeremy Corbyn treatment, the Chris Williamson treatment, false allegations of anti-Semitism. Now, don't get me wrong. Anti-Semitism is a foul, vile, virulent, fatal poison. It caused the greatest crime of the 20th century, maybe one of the greatest crimes of all human history. Because it wasn't just that there were 6 million Jews killed in the fascist Nazi death camps, it's that the Nazis intended to eliminate every single last Jew on the planet if they could, certainly on the continent of Europe. An industrialized, systemized, genocidal attempt to wipe out literally an entire group of people. Not for anything that they had done, but because entirely of who and what they were. And anti-Semitism is still a thing. It's a thing on the right of politics, but it's also, thanks to some fools, a thing on the left of politics. Idiots who translate their detestation of the role of the banking sector, of globalized finance, transfer it, not to Jews, they don't say Jews, but they bring up a Jewish name and try to indicate or imply that our problems with finance capital are somehow the responsibility of the Jews. They bring up Mr. Rothschild as if he controlled the world's banking system, which is absolute nonsense. But you'd be amazed at the number of left-wing people who say that kind of thing. People who say to me that Jews own the mass media when they own virtually none of the mass media. People who say that Rupert Murdoch is Jewish when he's not. People who imagine that somehow there's a cabal of Jews somewhere causing the problems for the mass of the people in the world. That's racism. That's anti-Semitism. I have said literally hundreds of times, hundreds, on radio, on television, in print, in Parliament, on the streets. I have said that denying the Holocaust should be a criminal offense. Thank you very much. Should be a criminal offense in Britain as it is in many parts of Europe. And I hold to that. Anti-Semitism must be fought rigorously and wherever it raises its ugly head. But you know, false allegations of anti-Semitism are not just wrong and unjust to the person being falsely accused. It's extremely dangerous on the principle of the old parable of the boy who cried wolf. If everybody's an anti-Semite, the real anti-Semites will be able to move under cover. And one day, God forbid, could be in a position to cause real harm to real people of the Jewish faith. So, I'm not saying that there's no anti-Semitism. I'm not even saying there's no anti-Semitism on the left. There is. But Jeremy Corbyn ain't no anti-Semite, bruv. And Chris Williamson isn't either. Now, Chris is at a meeting right now with his confidants to plan his next move. I've told him that there are many thousands of his confidants listening and watching this program, and given him an open invitation between now and the next 2 hours and 44 minutes, to be precise, to call in and talk to us. And if he does, of course, we'll put him straight onto the airwaves. So we're talking to Casandra Fairbanks on the debates, but also on her friend and mine, Julian Assange. She's a redoubtable campaigner to try and free Julian Assange from the dungeon at Belmarsh Prison in South London, and to stop him falling into an even greater gulag in the US injustice system. We'll be talking to Kevin Marr, a regular on the Mother of All talk shows, a former Labour advisor, on the upheaval going on inside the Labour Party, to which I've just referred. And finally, we'll talk to Bill Bradshaw, the author of the book about the day that Bob Dylan got tangled up in the Isle of Wight. For non-Bob Dylan fans, the greatest Bob Dylan song is Tangled Up in Blue. Now, 50 years ago, the greatest, most famous open-air music festival in all history took place at Woodstock. Bob Dylan lived almost literally across the road from Woodstock. He chose not to go to Woodstock and to come to the Isle of Wight instead. Now, again, for international viewers and listeners, the Isle of Wight is a very, very small place. It's off the coast of England, and most people in England have no idea even how to get there. But Bob found his way there. And tomorrow, yesterday I was at Donald Trump's towers in Ayrshire. Tomorrow I'm at Planet Hollywood, because there's the launch of the publicity drive to get people to attend the 50th anniversary Isle of Wight Festival, where the presence of Bob Dylan 50 years before, making history, will be fully commemorated. He's the author, as I say, of Bob Dylan at the Isle of Wight Festival 1969. He's Bill Bradshaw, and he will be joining us. So let me remind you, finally, before this break, of the number you have to call, 02077 982 255. Or you can tweet us at George Galloway, at RTUK News. Don't forget to at both of us, at George Galloway, at RTUK News. No, it's RT News on here. Is it RTUK News or RT News? Everything. RTUK News and RT News. It won't do any harm for the bosses to know just how many of you are engaged with this show. But you can also, as I said, and this is a novel development, leave us a video message on Skype at GGMOATS. That's at GGMOATS. Now, Tamar, who's behind the glass and who's Skype plan this is. We'll have more to say about that new innovation in a minute. You're tuned to the mother of all talk shows.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, new and improved and unleashed here on Sputnik Radio, or Sputnik News, whatever you want to call it. For those of you listening on the radio, this may not be relevant to you, but for those of you that are watching, and for those of you that are listening that do want to get in touch, that have something to say, then join us on Skype. What you have to do, for those of you that are watching, for those of you that are listening also, please make sure that you can do this as well, find GG MOATS, which you can do in the search the Skype bar, which is usually on the left-hand side of your Skype menu. You'll be able to find GG MOATS. The name of the program is called MOATS Unleashed. Once you get there, you have to go to the message window, which is here. For those of you, again, listening, it's the main window to the right. And at the bottom, there is an icon with a little video. You click that, and that will allow you, hi everybody, to record your message. Record that message, and then send it through to us. Once we've got that, we will look at those messages, and then we will play those to George. You can ask us anything. If there's something on your mind that you want to get off your chest, then send us those videos. But until then, I'll hand you back to George.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@SputnikNews.com.
Fantastic output, actually, on Sputnik. You really should keep it on your dial. British shows, American shows, shows that are of interest and importance to people all over the world. And we're very grateful to be on this platform. Now, Casandra Fairbanks, whom I introduced in a way earlier, is a legend, actually, herself. She's from Gateway Pundit. She's a redoubtable campaigner for Julian Assange, as I said, but she's also got a very sharp eye on the US political system. And if I'm lucky, she's joining me now on Skype. Casandra, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic to see you on the screen. I thought it was just going to be a call. I'm so happy that we're on Skype. Let's talk, if we can, first of all, about the two Democratic Party hustings that took place on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. I'd like you to talk us through the runners and riders, who did well, who did badly, who moved up, who moved down. Can you do that for us?
Sure. So the first Democratic debate was on Wednesday. It had Tulsi Gabbard, who's I'm personally a big fan of.
She's the main anti-war, anti-imperialist, anti-interventionist candidate, isn't she?
Yeah, and she was polling at between 0 and 1% before the debate, and she ended up being the most Google searched candidate. She was, she won the Drudge poll. She's really great. They tried to trap her into like a domestic policy question, and she completely ignored it and started railing against, war with Iran, and it was a pretty exciting moment for her.
She's a former she's a veteran of the armed services too. She knows about war.
Yeah, and she's great. She was the first politician to hop on TV immediately after Julian Assange was arrested and call for him to be released, called for charges to be dropped. She's gaining a lot of traction on both sides of the aisle right now. I think that there's a lot of Republicans, a lot of independents, just a lot of people who are sick of the establishment, and who are disappointed in how Trump has hired a lot of neocons. She's gaining a lot of support from those kind of people.
And how did she do in the debate?
Oh, she was great. She, like I had said before, she just completely ignored this question about like equal pay for women or something that they had lobbed at her. It was like a softball question. They clearly didn't want her to talk about foreign policy. She just completely ignored it, went off on foreign policy. She destroyed this neoliberal, I forget his name even right now. I think it was Tim something. But he started talking about how we needed to, fight the Taliban and stuff, and she just laid him out, did a murder on live television. It was pretty great.
Who else was on that first night then?
There was Buttigieg. There was...
Tell us about him. He's a mayor, quite a controversial figure in his own locality.
Yeah, he's facing a lot of backlash right now because of an officer-involved shooting in his town. There's a racial element to it. I guess it was a white cop and a black suspect that got shot, and so he's dealing with a lot of backlash on that and his handling of it. So it was a good debate. It was a lot more interesting than Thursday nights, I think, which had Biden and Kamala Harris.
Well, we've seen a lot of coverage of Thursday night because of the clash between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I described Biden earlier as looking like a figure in a waxwork museum. I don't know what work he's had done, but it certainly robbed him of almost all facial expression. I thought he did very badly in the debate.
Yeah, I thought Biden was terrible. I think that he dropped 10 points in the polls after the debate.
Really?
His exchange with Kamala definitely did a number on his campaign. And he came across just out of touch and old and same old. Everything that he talked about was like what he did with Obama. He didn't really talk about what he would do going forward. And I think that really hurt him, aside from, Kamala destroying him in that back and forth.
It was a very able piece of work by her. For those who didn't see it, she pointed out that Biden had boasted previously of his close relationship with segregationist senators who had opposed the busing of black children into schools that had hitherto been entirely white schools, the whole integrationist agenda. And she pointed out that she was, as a young girl, one of those students bused into a school that she would not otherwise have been able to enter as part of the informal, unofficial segregationism that was still practiced in the United States when she was a school student. He really didn't recover from that, did he?
No. And there's been a lot of talk back and forth about whether or not her story was true because of the years that she was in school and things like that. But it didn't really matter because her performance she nailed it. I mean, they had obviously prepared her very well, and he couldn't recover from it at all. She killed him.
Tell us about Bernie Sanders. A lot of people listening to this on this side of the pond, and I expect elsewhere, are very much hoping that he can this time be the nominee, as he was, many people think, robbed of being the nominee last time.
Yeah, I was a big supporter of Bernie Sanders in the previous primary. I don't think that he did as well this time as he did, during 2015, 2016. I think he came across very angry and very anti-Trump. He was more focused on Trump than he was about presenting his ideas. He still did well, though. I think he did pretty good. I'm pretty sure he went up in the polls after the debate as well. Yeah.
Apparently he did, but not quite as much as others did, or as Biden went down. So what happens now? That's the two scheduled hustings. Is it on now to the first primaries?
I think that there's another round of debates, but it's going to be much smaller because the candidates have to raise double the amount of money that they raised to get into the first round.
You had to raise 65,000 donors to get a place in the debates.
Yeah, and now they have to do double to get into the next round because there's just so many candidates.
Yeah. Any surprise candidates, Casandra? Anyone that no one had rated before, suddenly boosted?
I think that Tulsi came out a really big winner. She was, a lot of people weren't familiar with her, and a lot of people here are just sick of war. And she was the only candidate who talked about ending these wars, bringing money back home, working on, things that we need to fix here. And it was really refreshing, and I think that a lot of people saw that. I think that Andrew Yang has been doing pretty well because he's like the meme candidate now, but he kind of failed in the debates. He's alleged that they turned off his microphone, so he only got to speak for 2 minutes. A lot of people
that can happen.
Yeah, a lot of people had been watching for him and what he was going to do, but I think that he came off. He didn't come off as well as he should have.
I read him saying that these kind of debates were not his milieu, not his meter, because he's a more intellectual, he's better in writing, better one-to-one than in this adversarial clash of the titans, even though some of them are very far from being Titanic. They're more like Titanic, the movie, and sinking ships. Do you think there's any merit in that? I mean, did you think the format was a good one?
No, I think that it devolved into a yelling match half the time. It came across just terrible. The moderators didn't have control of what was happening. There were screaming fights. Kamala actually got in a good line when she was like, the people they don't want to see a food fight. They want to hear about how they're going to get food on their tables. It seemed pretty rehearsed, but it still came across really well because she got everybody to shut up, and it was descending into chaos. They had no control. Again,
it was a very effective line. Now, what about the shoe that didn't drop? Elizabeth Warren is thought by many to be the official establishment candidate. If not Biden, then her. How did she do?
I think she did well. She's not one of my favorites, but I think that she came across very clear. She came across strong. They definitely gave her more time than they did most candidates. I think it was her and Cory Booker had the most time during that debate. And she had very softball questions. I think that they were clearly, trying to make her look good. And it worked. I think,
Has she gone up in the polls?
I'm not sure actually where she stands right now. I think that she had seen a little bump.
Yeah, we'll have some people check that and get back to people on that. Lastly then, we have at least one thing in common. We're both partisans for poor Julian, unable to see the sky again because he's in Belmarsh prison. What can you tell us about how the feeling is in the United States? Poor Chelsea Manning is still behind bars for refusing to testify against Julian. How do you feel? Is opinion waking up to the grave importance of this case?
It seemed for a minute that people were finally understanding how important this is, not just for him, but for themselves. Like journalists in the U.S. finally seemed to start to get it. And then as soon as they announced that the trial or the trial won't be until February, it kind of lost media steam. People stopped talking about it. It's been really hard to get people to continue speaking out. They're just kind of complacent and quiet about it.
This is
which is a shame.
The British trial in February, the extradition trial.
Yeah.
So people have thought it's in the long grass kind of thing, and Julian, meanwhile, wastes away in Belmarsh.
Yep. I haven't seen hardly any discussion of him in mainstream media since the last hearing.
What about Chelsea Manning? Now, on the face of it, all the liberals and the pussy hats and the feminists and all, you'd think they'd be really rattling the cages of the U.S. justice system about this woman again being behind bars, having already served her sentence, and being fined $500 a day on top of being incarcerated. Is there no one speaking up for Chelsea Manning?
No, it's been very quiet. I mean, it's like they just forgot about her. The news cycle moves so quickly now that people talk about things for a minute and then they just forget about it. Meanwhile, she's rotting away in prison for refusing to testify against her publisher. It's insane. I think that the media, by being silent about this kind of stuff, they're hammering nails into their own coffins, because the rights that they give up right now are going to stay gone. And we see Trump going after reporters constantly, saying that they're not news, that they're not media, and this will be used. This precedent that's being set by Julian's case can be used against them later. If the government can decide who is press, who's not, and put whistleblowers in prison for refusing to testify against a news outlet, this is a very, very dangerous precedent.
Indeed so. Casandra Fairbanks from Gateway Pundit, many thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, what do you think of that? What do you think of the Democratic Party candidates? 02077 982 255, or tweet at George Galloway, at RTUK, at RT News. Any of these. And of course, Skype me, as Casandra just did, at GG MOATS. We'll be talking to Kevin Marr in the second hour about the Chris Williamson case and what's happening to him as a cipher, really, for Jeremy Corbyn. Because I didn't say it earlier, but maybe because I thought it was obvious, the target is not really Chris Williamson, a backbench MP with no great political future ahead of him. The target is Jeremy Corbyn, to try and stop Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister of Britain, the first ever anti-war, anti-imperialist Prime Minister of Britain. That's not a small thing. And you see in the G20 and in the EU and in NATO and so on, the kind of things that just one person standing up and saying no can achieve. If it can't do much positively, it can be a spanner in the works. It can bring all kinds of things crashing to a halt. So we'll be talking to Kevin about that. He's a former Labour advisor, and as I say, we'll be talking to Bill Bradshaw about Bob Dylan tangled up in white. Let's take a break.
Breaking news, expert analysis, and exclusive stories, all in one place. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Tune in every Monday to Loud and Clear with Brian Becker for our regular segment, Education for Liberation with Bill Ayers, where we take a look at the state of education across the country. What's happening in our schools, colleges, and universities, and what impact does it have on the world around us? Our resident expert is Bill Ayers, the legendary activist, educator, and author. Tune in to Loud and Clear this Monday and every Monday for Education for Liberation with Bill Ayers.
This is Dominic Carter, a political reporter in New York for Verizon Files TV News.
This is Dr. Bill Honigman of Progressive Democrats of America, PDAmerica.org.
Hey, everybody, my name is Tim Black of The Tim Black Show.
This is Tom Luongo of Gold Coast and Guns. Hello, this is Benny Johnson.
Hi, this is Juanita Broderick, author of You'd Better Put Some Ice on That.
This is Jamal Thomas from the Progressive Soapbox.
Hey, this is Raheem from D.C.
This is Rachel Blevins, a correspondent with RT America, and you're listening to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
When I'm waking up in the morning and I'm looking for what's on the queue for the day, I tune to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
The wokest radio show for your wokest AM.
These guys are the best in the business and experts when it comes to policy.
They're bringing you the top headlines with an angle that you won't see in the mainstream media.
Fault Lines is the greatest show on the radio. I enjoy immensely talking with Lee and Garland. They always treat me from either side with due respect, and it's a wonderful conversation.
the best morning news show in America. Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
Lee and Garland speak truth to power from the depths of the swamp itself, right here on Radio Sputnik.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
You're watching and listening, I hope, all over the world to the mother of all talk shows. Now, we were used to reading only tweets, but now that we're on Facebook and on YouTube, we get shoals of feedback from viewers and listeners. And my able assistant, Elizabeth F. Grape, joins me now to tell me how it's going on social media. Elizabeth.
It's been hard to keep up the YouTube. It's a couple of comments every second. So I've done my best to try and keep up with all the comments.
Well done,
yeah, a lot of
thank you.
people getting in on the conversation. Somebody said who to choose tonight, George Galloway or Kylie Minogue. Obviously, she's performing at Glastonbury.
It's Kylie at Glastonbury.
So a lot of people have given up watching
Somebody
Kylie.
pointed out that Kylie Minogue is exactly the same age as Michael Gove, the Conservative leadership candidate.
That's not a
but
nice
she's led a much
comparison, is it?
cleaner
Yeah.
life than him.
Yeah, we've had a lot of international people saying
Oh,
hello
yeah?
from Sweden. That's Borge from Sweden, from Brazil, from Mexico.
My goodness.
And particularly people enjoying Casandra. There's been a lot of love for her on YouTube. But some people are asking, why wasn't she saying anything about Andrew Yang?
She did. She said that he did well,
they wanted
but
a bit
that
more.
he got less time. They switched off his mic. They
Yes,
turned down his volume.
Let Yang Speak was on
and
NBC,
Adam, Ask Adam will be in later.
Yeah,
He's
I
a big fan of Yang.
People have some questions about the universal basic income that hopefully Adam will be able to
Well, there's
explain
nothing
to
he
us.
can't answer.
Exactly. And then on Facebook, we've got somebody that commented, Joe Blogs, I'm not sure that's his real name, but he says, in a political system where your success is determined by how much you can raise, you can see why they continue to make office. I think so he's basically saying that in America, it's basically how much money you can raise.
So, Sweden, Brazil, America.
We've got a caller from the Bahamas who's been calling him.
From the Bahamas. Attacks XL.
Well, he has an American accent, so
okay.
Yeah.
How fantastic. That's brilliant. That's really brilliant. So it's busy on both Facebook and
very
on
busy,
YouTube.
yes.
Couple of comments per second, you say?
Yes, a couple of comments
That's
per
really
second,
fantastic.
yes.
Well, stay on top of it, Elizabeth.
I will, I'll do my best.
And come back in.
Yeah.
Come back in and we'll bring the viewers and listeners up to date. I think we've got our first caller of the evening on the line. Tony, on line one. Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, hi, John. Good to talk at last.
And you?
My question is about the mainstream media.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, what's happened recently. If you were Prime Minister of Corbyn, or as and when Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, what would you do on a practical level to control them? Because they're out of control. I mean, on the radio, there isn't a single left-wing voice, not one. Now, obviously, like Lord Brotherson in the Daily Mail, you can make sure that these people are owned by residents, but on a practical level, what else can you do? I mean, if you did that, all that would happen is that Rothermere would sell to Jacob Rees-Mogg or Cameron, and, you know, the editorial would still be the same.
Well, I'll probably disappoint you, Tony, but I'm completely opposed to controlling media, completely opposed to it. If you've ever been in a country or lived in a country where the media is controlled, it is the death.
I lived in Vietnam for a very, very long time.
It is death. So I'm not in favour of doing anything to control the Daily Mail. I think that the readers of the Daily Mail should themselves discontinue purchasing the Daily Mail. Or even if they won't do that, they should make sure they read other things too. The good news is...
Yes, but on a more macro level.
Yeah, well, I'm coming to that. But the good news is fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer people are reading these newspapers. When I go in now to a supermarket and I see the piles of unsold newspapers, I sing hallelujah. And it looks so last century. Piles of dead trees in the aisles of the supermarkets. Hardly anyone buys these things anymore. They're losing circulation by the million. And I believe that's a good thing. We used to have an old saying, when the last editor of the Daily Express is strangled by the last edition. of the Daily Mail, that'll be us free. Well, of course, I'm not in favour of strangling anyone. But I'm not in favour of controlling the media. I'm in favour of a policy that allows the media to proliferate, allows us all to be journalists, all to be broadcasters.
But I mean, the thing is going in the opposite direction, isn't
equals the playing field. Yeah, but you were asking if I was the Prime Minister or if Corbyn was the Prime Minister. I do think that something needs to be done about the state broadcaster, the BBC. Because,
and the radio.
Because we are, well, not the commercial radio. I'm in favour of, because commercial radio is owned by owners. They can do what they like with their commercial radio. Yeah, and they do. I'm a victim of that. But I'm not in favour of controlling them. I think that would be the road to perdition. I'm in favour.
I mean, George, look, there aren't any right left-wing voices out there at all.
Well, but the listeners know that. And therefore, if people want to hear left-wing voices, they'll go looking for them. You can't force people to want to listen to somebody other than Heartless Brute or Nick Ferrari in the morning. If they want to listen to them, there's nothing you can do about that. Sorry?
LBC have got their cake and eat it, haven't they? In that they purport to be a balanced broadcaster, and they say they are, but of course they're not.
Well, anybody that believes they're a balanced broadcaster, I've got a bridge here in London. I could sell them. None of these stations are balanced any more than Fox News is balanced. They're all biased. And when the listeners and the viewers tumble to that, and when they decide they don't like it, that's a different thing. Then they'll go looking.
The thing about propaganda, isn't it? They don't know they're being duped.
Well, you know,
it's incessant. It's 24/7.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I think most people who listen to the radio and watch the BBC know that they're being lied to. I don't think people are stupid. It's our task to provide them with alternative media that is of the same quality and is readable, listenable, watchable, as entertaining, as exciting, as informative. That's our job. And if we're not doing that,
decide to shut down YouTube, it's not going to be long now, George. You know it. They're going to say, "Oh, they don't like this," and "No, they don't like that."
I don't know it.
It's a private monopoly.
Well, it's not a monopoly because anybody can start a YouTube. I mean, it's not rocket science. If YouTube shut down, another YouTube would be along in a minute. That's the
but
beauty.
That's like saying you can set up your own political party. Come on, you know it's not true.
Well, I know that it is true. I know that it is true. Look, Facebook, YouTube, they're just blackboards on which anyone can put up anything. And if the owners decide to self-harm by banning all and sundry from their platform, they'll begin to lose customers, lose viewers. And those that set up alternatives will begin to gain them. What I'm really saying to you is, if there's anything worse than the private dictatorship in the media, it would be a state dictatorship in the media. That would be truly death. Now, I know we're not going to agree on that.
What about tabloids? Can you control tabloids?
Say that last point. Say it again, sir.
Tabloid newspapers. I mean, they're different in type than, newspapers.
Yeah.
Can you do anything to control tabloids?
I don't want to control.
Freedom of Fifth Amendment and all that.
We're not on the same page. I don't want to control tabloids or broadsheets. I don't want to control other people's media. I want to level the playing field so that new voices, new players can more easily come in. And I think that Corbyn has the plan for that. Maybe we'll discuss that on another occasion. Thanks very much, Tony, for the call. I've got Fra in Belfast on the line in Ireland. Go ahead, Fra.
George, congratulations on your new format.
Thank you. I hope you like it.
I do, absolutely, man. I like all the new innovative things and the Skype call, which I have yet to master. But I think it's fantastic that as one door closed, not one open, but several hundred open, because you've got a worldwide, you've got a global audience that you didn't have access to. And as all your regular listeners, and I hope everyone tuning into the programme now understands that you are a voice for the people who are not heard by the mainstream media, by their respective governments, by the people they elect, and by the rest of us who want to see the world change for the better.
There's not many people on the media this evening defending Chris Williamson, put it that way.
No, absolutely, and fair play to you for doing that, because I think the man is being vilified along with Jeremy Corbyn. My personal kind of opinion on this whole thing is that Zionism is buying the right-wing politicians, across the globe through financial donations and backing their campaigns. And when you see people like Bolsonaro with an Israeli flag at his public meetings, you're thinking, should that not be a Brazilian flag? What's happening here? Tommy Robinson, they're changing anti-Semitism for Islamophobia. But George, I was phoning up because a lot of people are chatting about this rapprochement between Trump and Kim Il-jung and the DNC in North Korea, South Korea. As soon as I heard and watched this, the first thought that struck me was, I remember when they bombed Colonel Gaddafi's tent and they murdered I believe it was some of his grandchildren.
His daughter, his adopted daughter, yeah.
Thank you, George. Thank you for correcting me. And then we had Tony Blair bring Gaddafi in from the cold. So first there was the sanctions, then there was the military attacks on him physically and his extended family. Then there's this, come on, Muammar, come and join the club here. We'll end the sanctions. Maybe it won't be a pariah state, it'll be a full nation with the standard kind of welcome within the United Nations and the dawning of the West. And look what happened in Libya. As soon as it gave up its weapons of, I would call defence, not weapons of mass destruction, but the weapons to defend the revolution in the country, you've ended up with a destroyed Libya. So when I see Trump asking Kim Il-jung to come forward and meet him and saying, now, we're going to keep the pressure on, we're going to keep the sanctions on, but, maybe let's hope going forward in the fullness of time, et cetera, that Korea will end being a pariah state according to the West, and come into that kind of club. And my fear for that particular part of the world, for the North Korean Republic, is that if it denuclearizes and you have a naked, nuke-free North Korea, then I think everything's back on the table, as Trump and his military advisors are very keen to state.
Well, look, thanks, Fra, for the kind things that you said, especially as I'm going to disagree with you. I don't believe that the North Korean leader is any kind of mug, and I don't think he's going to end up in a club with the West. The club that North Korea is in and should be in is with its neighbors. It'll be in a club, as it's always been, with Russia, with China. It'll be, I hope, in a new club, one that was robbed from them in the 1950s, with its fellow Koreans in the South, and with, I hope, a reconciliation, if reparation and proper accountability is held, with Japan, which, of course, killed gigantic numbers of Koreans, North and South, during the Japanese occupation of Korea. That's where North Korea is located. I believe it will always be. And I don't believe that North Korea will agree to disarm itself for the very reason you just gave, what happened to the Libyan leaders in the not too distant past, unless it has security guarantees. And its security guarantees must come, and I believe will come, from China and Russia. So the United States can guarantee the security of the south of Korea, and Russia and China will guarantee the security of the north of Korea. Sanctions can be ended, and a better life can be had for the people of the north of Korea. Now, I've been there twice, Fra, and whilst it has many achievements, whilst it has many good things about its society, collectivism, the sense of oneness and all of that. They're very, very poor in North Korea. And there have been times, and I was there during one of them, when they were literally eating grass cakes. I was in a factory where they were making cakes out of grass. Now, only cows should eat grass. People should not eat grass. And I believe that we need to help the North Koreans get out of this bind. And I believe that Russia and China are doing that. Fra, thanks for that excellent call. A couple of quick tweets. Katia Compass says Jeremy Corbyn will be purged too by the war criminal Blair and the Blairites. Expect a coup after a Jeremy election win, like Lula. Lawfare in vogue. And Neil Rose says Brexit is not the issue. Corbyn is the issue. I should clarify that Corbyn is the real issue for UK elites, more so than Brexit. And Mark Abelin says, I'd never vote for a unionist party, but there are plenty of people in England who would. So what does this mean? Would there be a military coup if Corbyn won a general election? What has this country come to? And Christina says, oh dear God, is the new MOATS going to be like listening to Farage on LBC? If so, I'm out. What are you talking about, Christina? Have you been listening for the last hour? Is Nigel Farage or LBC standing up in the way I'm standing up on these issues? You say it's not meant as an insult, but I'll tell you what, it feels like an insult to me. This is all about Ask Adam, because Adam has different politics on some subjects to me and different politics, apparently, to Christina. Christina, if you can find another show on the air at the minute that is closer to your politics, by all means switch over to it. But I don't censor other people's political views, neither callers, nor tweeters, nor texters, nor guests. And Adam, the cleverest man in England, is my guest on this show. And he'll be coming up in the course of the next couple of hours. The first hour is almost by. The good news is there are 2 more still to come. I'll give you the numbers again. 02077 982 255. Or you can tweet us at George Galloway at RTUK News. Now, can I throw to the break, Tamar? I'll be right back.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
This is Dominic Carter, a political reporter in New York for Verizon Files TV News.
This is Dr. Bill Honigman of Progressive Democrats of America, PDAmerica.org.
Hey, everybody, my name is Tim Black of The Tim Black Show.
This is Tom Luongo of Gold Coast and Guns. Hello, this is Benny Johnson.
Hi, this is Juanita Broderick, author of You'd Better Put Some Ice on That.
This is Jamal Thomas from the Progressive Soapbox.
Hey, this is Raheem from D.C.
This is Rachel Blevins, a correspondent with RT America, and you're listening to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
When I'm waking up in the morning, I'm looking for what's on the queue for the day. I tune to Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
The wokest radio show for your wokest AM.
These guys are the best in the business and experts when it comes to policy.
They're bringing you the top headlines with an angle that you won't see in the mainstream media.
Fault Lines is the greatest show on the radio. I enjoy immensely talking with Lee and Garland. They always treat me from either side with due respect, and it's a wonderful conversation.
The best morning news show in America. Fault Lines with Nixon and Stranahan.
Lee and Garland speak truth to power from the depths of the swamp itself, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
US President Donald Trump has met North Korea's chairman Kim Jong-un at the demilitarized zone today. President Trump made history by becoming the first president of the United States to have set foot in North Korea after decades. He shook hands with North Korea's Kim Jong-un over the demarcation line between the two Koreas. The two heads of state then stepped back to South Korea, where they were joined by South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Kim Jong-un continued by saying that Trump's entry into North Korean territory showed willingness to strive for a better future, and that the wonderful ties with the US president enable us to overcome barriers, since their close relationship made it possible to arrange a meeting just overnight. The 50-minute impromptu meeting at the DMZ comes after previous negotiations earlier this year between Pyongyang and Washington ended in deadlock after the US ultimately refused to offer North Korea any relief from economic sanctions that had been placed on the state. President Donald Trump has admitted that the US has treated Turkey in an unfair way over the S-400 missile system squabble, but blamed his predecessor Barack Obama for the situation. Asked whether Washington would slap Ankara with sanctions for purchasing the S-400 instead, as US officials have repeatedly threatened, Trump said that we are looking into it. Russia and Turkey planned a $2.5 billion contract on the delivery of 4 battalion sets worth of S-400s to Turkey in December in 2017, nearly a year into Trump's presidency. In December 2018, the US cleared a $3.5 billion Patriot missile deal for Turkey, but Ankara has yet to accept, saying that the terms proposed by the US simply aren't as good as its deal with Russia. Turkish officials have said that they are still looking at buying the US systems, but not in place of their S-400s, whose deliveries are expected to start in July. The Northern Ireland Affairs Committee has revealed that the UK government has taken £17 million in taxes over the past 3 years from the $12 billion in seized assets from the Libyan government linked to the country's late leader Muammar Gaddafi. The UK's Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP, demanded that the British government hand over the millions earned from the late Gaddafi's frozen UK assets to the victims of Irish Republican Army attacks, or the IRA. Nigel Dodds, the DUP deputy leader, disclosed to the Sunday Telegraph that the UK Treasury had taken £17 million in taxes in the past 3 years from the $12 billion in Libyan assets linked to the slain colonel. The report claims that Gaddafi's government supplied weapons, including Semtex explosives, to the IRA during the violent conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles, and were used in bombings across the UK. Libyan assets have been frozen since 2011 by a ruling that the United Nations that the civil war in which Gaddafi was overthrown and killed. The Syrian authorities have seized a collection of antiquities in the city of Rostan as they continue clearing the Homs province, the Syrian Arab news agency reports. According to the outlet, the terrorist group Daesh had prepared to smuggle the stolen artifacts abroad and kept them in a local house, but law enforcement was tipped off. The items at Al Ali pointed out that the findings include a collection of Roman, Byzantine and Islamic coins. I'm Tamer Esfahani. We'll see you in the next hour.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway, only on Sputnik Radio.
You are watching and listening to the mother of all talk shows. I'm George Galloway, and I'm here until 10 o'clock, at least where I am in London, certainly for the next 2 hours. You can call me on 02077 982 255. That's 02077 982 255. Or tweet me at George Galloway at RTUK News. You can leave us a video message on Skype at GG MOATS.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway, only on Sputnik Radio.
Now, we heard from Elizabeth earlier that the number of comments on YouTube and on Facebook are simply unmanageable. There are so many. But I promise you, over the next few days, I'll read them all, every single one. And as many as possible, I will find a way to respond to. Here's more tweets. Heterovono on the Flint water crisis. Fix the water. This is America. We have the money and the manpower. Just promise Michigan homeless food and they'll help lay the new piping. How is this hard? This on the back of the news that I saw today in passing, that the people responsible for the poisoning of the water supply in an American city, in Michigan, in Flint, are not, after all, going to be prosecuted. And Lord Lurkin, not sure if he's really a member of the House of Lords, says on Chris Williamson, you opened the debate with a taboo subject. Anyone daring to challenge your claim face consequences. So what is the point? Well, you certainly won't face any consequences. If you have a different point of view to mine, your call will in fact be prioritized. And if you've never called me before, that will be prioritized too. Women callers will be prioritized. All callers, of course, are welcome. And as to the so-called taboo, I've laid my cards on the table, my lord. And if you want to lay yours, call me now and you'll be first on. 02077 982 255. Now, Kevin Marr is a regular, a legend actually, for the many appearances on the mother of all talk shows. He's not just a former Labour advisor, he's an acute analyst and commentator on British political events. Obviously, more on Labour events than on the Conservatives, though he knows a thing or two about that too. He's also the author of the best book of recent years on Ireland, The Inevitability of the Reunification of Ireland, which he and I believe may be much more imminent than many people imagine. I'll ask him in the course of this next interview how people can get hold of that book, because I tried to give away my copy of it recently and my wife stopped me doing so, saying it might be difficult to replace it. Kevin Marr, are you on the line, sir? Kevin? We've lost him, but we will, I promise, get him. The proximate cause of Kevin's appearance is the tumult going on in the Labour Party. For international viewers and listeners, let me sketch out that which most British viewers and listeners already know. Only a few months ago, just maybe 3 or 4 months ago, Labour and the Conservatives were both on 40% in the public opinion polls, and many polls were beginning to show Labour in the lead. Now, Labour and the Conservatives are under 20% in the public opinion polls. Brexit has broken everything apart. The Brexit Party, who are currently rallying in Birmingham, have thousands of people at their jamboree, which isn't really a conference, more a kind of, I don't know, WWE convention. But there's no doubt at all that the Brexit Party are top dogs in the opinion polls at everyone else's expense. Cue another round of savage, and I mean savage. American listeners have never seen anything like this last week. Absolute chaos broke loose in the Labour Party when Chris Williamson, about whom I spoke earlier, was very briefly readmitted into the Labour Party. It didn't even last 24 hours before he was pushed out again. And the chaos caused, or was caused, we'll hear what Kevin thinks about that, a backlash of more than 100, getting on for 150 Labour members of Parliament, including Jeremy Corbyn's own front bench people, and members of the House of Lords called peers, signed a letter demanding that further action be taken against Williamson on the grounds that he had said that the Labour Party had been too apologetic about the steps it had taken to make sure that the ugliness of anti-Semitism never raised its ugly face in their ranks. I think we've got Kevin on the line now. Kevin, are you there?
Good evening, George. I'm here again.
Oh, very clear. Welcome. Kevin, it was a bad week for Labour, wasn't it?
It was. It's never a good week when you've got a government that's on the ropes. We've got no prime minister really in place. We've got a lame duck or a dead duck as prime minister at the moment, just filling space in Downing Street. We've got a quite bitter contest between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt to replace her. All eyes should be on the Conservative Party and the fantastical positions that they've got on everything from Brexit to public spending at the moment. And instead of that, we've got a Labour Party process story dominating, parts of the news agenda at a time when we could be weeks away from a general election. So it's not a good place for the Labour Party to find itself in. There's a very good chance, as I say, that in September or October we have a general election in this country with so much at stake and so much to play for. And yet here we are with another week where Labour's internecine problems, internecine feuding becomes the dominant story.
Well, we'll come back to that story, but let me throw another one in. The Rupert Murdoch vehicle, The Times, once the paper of record in this country, now really just a tabloid itself, came up with a very damaging story, if true, that Jeremy Corbyn was increasingly frail, too old, physically and mentally frail. They claimed that he had had a stroke, and they quoted, not by name of course, senior civil servants as the source or sources of this story. What can you tell us about that?
I mean, it's a fairly disgusting smear when you start to play the health of leading politicians as a shorthand for their competence or worthiness in public office. Jeremy Corbyn is around the 70 mark. Historically, of course, this is not a very old age for British statesmen.
Bernie Sanders is fighting Joe Biden to fight Donald Trump, and all of them are almost 80.
Exactly. 70 is the new 60. Clement Attlee was 62 when he of course became Prime Minister in 1945, led the great Labour coalition government that got more done in 5 or 6 years than many governments would do if they had the chance over 30 years. So his age is an irrelevance. What he wants to do as Prime Minister or what he wants to do in terms of leading government, that's legitimate terrain for people to criticise and critique. That's absolutely fine. But I think when you start to play the man, not the ball, then I think it's very dangerous. We saw this a little bit, of course, with Angela Merkel and her these incidents, 2 incidents of her shaking apparently at public events over the last couple of weeks. And again, it doesn't speak to her competence and her suitability for office. If people have got health issues, well, frankly, I think that's private business unless it intrudes into their general competence, and I don't think it does. And I think what we're seeing here is again a sort of an attempt to pick up on Jeremy Corbyn, the person, and try and undermine his integrity. As I say, cognizant that we are potentially a few weeks away from a general election. So I think you've got to see these kinds of stories and these kinds of criticisms for what they are. They are incredibly loaded, given the times that we're in. We are in uncharted political territory in so many different ways. I mean, the fact that we may have a prime minister around the 70 mark and what have you is almost gloriously irrelevant, given all the other issues that the country faces. But as a general point, I think we're going to have to get used to the fact that we're going to see party leaders much older than we've perhaps been used to over the last 20 or 30 years, when if people haven't peaked in their early 40s, then they've almost left it too late. And I think we've now reached the point of saying we've had prime ministers of a tender vintage, if I can put it like that, and they often leave us in a big mess. So actually, perhaps age comes with wisdom, and with wisdom comes fewer mistakes.
Well, I'm all in favour of that analysis, Kevin. The thing about young leaders, of course, is you have to put up with them for a very long time after they've left office. That can be very embarrassing indeed. Your friend and mine, Tony Blair, springs to mind, but Barack Obama maybe also. I saw him in a chateau in France for his holidays at 35,000 euros per night.
Nice if you can get it. I mean, of course, we've got David Cameron sat in his shed.
I forgot about him.
Of course, in his late 40s, and there's nobody, of course, anymore got a good word to say about the chap.
Yeah.
Tony Blair made the remark, I think, a few weeks ago, George, about that actually he felt that if he'd have become Prime Minister at the age he's at now, he would have been far better at it than the age he was at.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
We can leave that point there. But of course, you know, the idea that you know everything and you are, you know, wise enough to, to deal with the problems of the country and of the world in your early 40s is I think will be seen as kind of heroically arrogant in years to come when we actually return to wisdom and people having put long years into public service before they aspire to these highest offices.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Absolutely.
Let's Kevin, let's go back to this process story. Conscious of the fact that this is an international audience now listening across the world. It burst on the news rather unexpectedly. Certainly I did not expect it, and neither did Chris Williamson. Nobody informed him, in fact, that he had been readmitted. He was readmitted on the advice of 2 barristers and a QC, who, as it happens, all 3 of them were themselves Jewish. There was a subcommittee, an obscure subcommittee of a committee, of a bigger committee, that opined and decided to reinstate Chris Williamson back into the Labour Party. Now, with all due respect to Jeremy Corbyn, I would argue that this is not a local matter. This is a nationally strategic matter, and not one that you can palm off to a subcommittee of a subcommittee. And I rather think the whole thing, whatever view you take on Williamson, and I've nailed my colours to the mast earlier in the show, the whole thing was handled really badly.
Oh, definitely so. Absolutely, definitely. I think what's driven this is a very sort of peculiar piece of housework, if you like, for the Labour Party, which is the party's written to all its sitting MPs, seeing whether they wish to fight the next general election. And as I say, we could be talking weeks away from that happening. Or whether they wish to retire, in which case there's obviously got to be a process, a democratic process, to select a new candidate for the seats that they currently hold. Because, of course, what happened in 2017 is that the election was kind of bounced on everybody. And what happened often in the Labour Party is instead of a proper, full process where members decide who their candidate's going to be for the various 650 parliamentary seats, instead of that, candidates were bounced into seats because there wasn't enough time. So it's perfectly logical to have this process now and to ask sitting MPs whether they wish to carry on or whether they don't. And I think what's happened is that process has caught Chris Williamson up, and probably some of the other MPs that have been that are perhaps suspended but not expelled from the Labour Party. And there are other people in that category along with Chris Williamson. So I suspect what's happened is that in a spirit of housekeeping, they've tried to sort out, particularly in Chris Williamson's case, can they resolve it, bring you back in, and then ask him this question and what have you. So I think that's what's driven it. And of course, what's happened is that, as you say, it's resulted in this significant backlash from members of the Parliamentary Labour Party, the MPs, Labour MPs, and members of the House of Lords as well, who've opposed his re-entry. And of course, you're right. I mean, everything I've read, Chris Williamson didn't know anything about this, and then there's been this reaction against any prospect of him coming back in. So the suspension has been reimposed, which is, it's a slightly farcical procedure, given this all plays out, of course, in public. And we're now waiting for something called the Labour Party's Disputes Committee, which is a very slightly Orwellian kind of body to adjudicate finally on whether Chris Williamson can return to the fold as a Labour MP and or whether he has to stay on the outside or not. But it is very totemic in lots of ways. I mean, I followed Chris Williamson's case, and I don't know Chris Williamson personally. I've engaged with him lots of times on social media over the years. I find Chris Williamson a very earnest man. Has he been lax in some of his phraseology? Possibly. Is he a raving anti-Semite? No, he isn't. Should he be readmitted to the Labour Party? Yes, he should. I think we're in a very strange position in British politics where we start to limit the views and the voices that we can have in political parties because, when you look back historically, when people like the Stafford Cripps, who was the radical Chancellor of the Exchequer in the Attlee government.
Oh, what a pity. I'm a big fan of Stafford Cripps. Go back, please, Kevin, to what you were saying about Stafford Cripps, a man I'm very interested in.
Oh, sorry, George, what did you just say?
Yeah,
again?
we lost you momentarily. If you go back to the Stafford Cripps point.
Yeah, so Stafford Cripps and Nyron Bevan, great figures in the post-war Labour government. Both of them were expelled from the Labour Party in 1939 for advocating, a sort of
popular fronts. Yes,
a popular front with other left-wing parties. So we've got to be very careful in British politics. We base a system on a centre-right party in the Conservatives and a centre-left party in Labour that agglomerates huge swathes of political opinion. There are people within both of the two main parties who, frankly, hate each other's guts and stand for very, very different things. But it's important that there's space for all of them to coexist. And I think if you start getting into the business of snipping off sections of opinion because some other people don't like it, then what you do is limit the appeal of these great political parties, and you open up space on the flank for new movements to come in and emerge. And that's very, very dangerous for Labour. So I think Chris Williamson, I think, as I say, I think he's been lax in some of his phraseology. I think that's certainly the case. I don't think he's an anti-Semite at all. I think Chris Williamson is a true believer in the Corbyn project. He's a party loyalist, and he's said things that he thinks are in the spirit of being loyal to the party. And I think that there is certainly a section of opinion in the Labour Party, and I don't want to just characterise it as bitter Blairites or people on the right. I think these terms are a bit bland these days. But there are certainly people who will look at any opportunity to undermine Jeremy Corbyn and his mandate. And I think all that does is to sour relations in the party to the point that the very, very future of the Labour Party comes into question. And I think we've got to find the habit of coexisting again, where people who may have different views from others, that doesn't require them to be expunged from the party, because if that happens, it's the end of days for a large political party under the first-past-the-post system. And something very similar is going on in the Conservative Party as well, where there's got to be room for people to agree to disagree. And I think if you start to limit that space, then all you do is limit the political ground that you hold and open up space for others to come in on the fringes. So I think the best thing Labour can do is try and get past this point and readmit Chris Williamson. And I think there's lots of lessons to be learned. Does the Labour Party have a problem with anti-Semitism? In part, yes. I think it's overstated, but clearly the Equalities and Human Rights Commission thinks there's an issue. Does the wider left have a problem with anti-Semitism? Yes, I think it does. But the wider left is not necessarily the Labour Party. I think what's happened very often is media and people have taken a view that lots of people on Twitter may have said things, well, they're all Jeremy Corbyn supporters, aren't they? They're all members of the Labour Party, aren't they? And they're not. They're just not. And I think Jeremy Corbyn and his team have failed, really, to set some context around, look, we're not responsible for every anonymous account on Twitter that propagates some anti-Semitic trope. That's not, we don't have a competence to police the whole of social media. We're responsible for people who are representatives of the Labour Party and members of the Labour Party, and we can deal with those people. But the wider people in the landscape, they're nothing to do with us. And unfortunately, what happens is all of that gets rolled into a general critique of anti-Semitism and Jeremy Corbyn's response to it. And, that's just where we are, I think, often with the impact of social media on contemporary politics.
One of the things that makes me suspicious, though, Kevin, is that Bernie Sanders, himself Jewish, is under precisely the same kind of attack as Jeremy Corbyn is. How someone like Sanders, with all these decades in politics, and with his Jewish culture, if not religious faith, I'm not sure that he is a religious man, but he's clearly culturally Jewish. He's from a Jewish heritage. But he's being attacked in almost word for word the same terms that Corbyn is. When in fact, isn't it true that both of them are guilty, if guilty is the word, of merely being sometimes rebarbative supporters of the Palestinian cause?
I think that's very true. I think that's very fair. That it becomes a zero-sum equation, unfortunately. That to be pro-Palestinian, to deprecate the policies and attitudes of successive Israeli governments in terms of their attitudes and the treatment of Palestinian people makes you anti-Semitic. And we've got to delineate these points, I think, very clearly. And of course, language matters and nuance matters, and lots of people blunder over some of these lines. But I think that we need to delineate a legitimate critique of Israeli government policy and the policies of Netanyahu and the treatment of Palestinian civilians, and be very, very clear in deprecating a lot of that without drifting over into a wider critique of Jewish people and Jewish culture. And I think some people on the left have been guilty of that. I don't say that's about Chris Williams necessarily, and I don't say that necessarily about other people who have been criticised for being anti-Semitic. I think there is a perfectly legitimate critique that is often not amplified in the way that it should be by mainstream politics, to say, look, there are lots of people in Israeli politics that are liberal and progressive and want a proper dialogue and want to get back to that mood of optimism, perhaps from the mid-1990s, around where this may go. We need to support these people in Israel as well. So it's not about just being anti-Israeli or anti-Jewish. It's about being very specific that Netanyahu, the right wing of Israeli politics, which just has no interest at all in any kind of just settlement. These are the areas where we need to be really specific in our criticisms and look for allies, even within Israeli politics, to help make that push.
Yeah, they're thin on the ground these days. The once were far more plentiful. Kevin, finally, and I'm grateful for your time, I'm trying to get a copy of your book for someone. Tell us how we get hold of it.
Oh, no, it's available, as I say, in all good bookshops. I think it's on the high street in the Waterstones and places like that. But it's also on Amazon as well. But I'll happily send you a copy.
No, I'm not angling for a free copy. I want to encourage people to buy it. What's it called again, exactly?
It's called The United Ireland, Why Unification is Inevitable and How It Will Come About.
And it's a fantastic read. Kevin Marr, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let's take a break.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
The mother of all talk shows is back. Unleashed, unabridged, uncensored, and unbelievable. Only on Sputnik Radio.
I mean, there have been more presidents and former prime ministers jailed in Israel than probably any other country in the world, and That's worth congratulating them for.
On one hand, you are totally right. It is really respectful. On the other hand, I knew some countries in which there is no need for this because the politicians are just not corrupted.
I'm not so sure about that one, Gideon. To our next caller, Gilbert, I think, in Los Angeles.
First, I want to thank you because, you know, you are really a stalwart of truth, and you really have demonstrated that ethics and morals still exist.
The EU that we now know has had exactly the same impact on working class people in Britain as the NAFTA had on working class people in the US.
Absolutely, and I think it's a worldwide phenomenon. And the only solution to this is to end neoliberalism or find a way to block it.
A group of people who are allegedly actually stealing it for themselves.
Well, they don't make coups the way they used to do. This shirt-sleeve Pinochet is really more like your average sort of meat-packing glitterati.
Well, Elizabeth Warren, it's looking like Joe Biden's going to be the nominee, and to please the progressive base, they're not going to choose Bernie Sanders as VP. You know, could possibly choose Elizabeth Warren to be VP. And I think even in that scenario, they would lose to Trump.
Sputnik Radio itself stays above the great controversies. It merely reports them. Contrary to propaganda lies, Sputnik Radio has no agenda. It just wants all the agendas out there on the table.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway, only on Sputnik Radio.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, new and improved and unleashed here on Sputnik Radio, or Sputnik News, whatever you want to call it. For those of you listening on the radio, this may not be relevant to you, but for those of you that are watching, and for those of you that are listening that do want to get in touch, that have something to say, then join us on Skype. What you have to do, for those of you that are watching, for those of you that are listening also, please make sure that you can do this as well, find GG MOATS, which you can do in the search the Skype bar, which is usually on the left-hand side of your Skype menu. You'll be able to find GG MOATS. The name of the program is called MOATS Unleashed. Once you get there, you have to go to the message window, which is here. For those of you, again, listening, it's the main window to the right. And at the bottom, there is an icon with a little video. You click that, and that will allow you, hi everybody, to record your message. Record that message, and then send it through to us. Once we've got that, we will look at those messages, and then we will play those to George. You can ask us anything. If there's something on your mind that you want to get off your chest, then send us those videos. But until then, I'll hand you back to George.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Tamar. Here's some Skype messages. Joseph Held, H-E-L-D, says, as an observant Torah Jew fighting against Zionism and a UK Labour member, I feel with you 100% regarding the suspension of Chris Williamson and Jackie Walker. I hope that everyone will share once our voice against this witch hunt against Jeremy Corbyn. Keep up your strong voice. Thank you, Joseph. Stephen Parker on Skype says, hi, loving the show. Biden would get demolished by Trump, in my opinion. In my opinion, too, Stephen. Joe Biden is Hillary Clinton without the lipstick. but with plenty of work done. Jeff Brown on Skype says, can you explain why the Labour Party leadership is so passive as they are being hammered by the Zionist anti-Semitism campaign? Well, I wish I could, but if I could prevail on that, then in my opinion we wouldn't be where we are today. But I'm not a part of the Labour leadership. If I had been, I would have insisted that this dichotomy that Kevin Marr talked about earlier should be established in steel, ironclad, bolted down to the floor. That to be against Israel is not to be against Jews. And insofar as anyone allows their opposition to Israel to look like, sound like, be like opposition to Jews, hatred of Jews, then we will take decisive action against such people. And not action, by the way, that takes 6 months, 9 months, 12 months or more to do. But the corollary of that is, if I say that Israel, in my opinion, is an apartheid state, as Jimmy Carter said on the cover of his book 20 years ago, as Nelson Mandela said, as Nelson Mandela's grandson said in the occupied territories very recently, and as is bleedingly obvious, emphasis on bleedingly, if I say that, then I am not attacking Jews. I am not being racist. I am describing that which I see with my own eyes. That's what Corbyn should have done. That's what Corbyn should have said. But instead he has retreated and sought to appease forces which, in my opinion, are literally unappeasable. And we have an old saying in Scotland, if you don't run, they can't chase you. And when they chase you, eventually you'll be so exhausted and overwhelmed by the chase that you won't be able to stand up and fight back. And we may have reached something like that point in Labour Party affairs at the minute. Now, D. Whaler sends a tweet on anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Do you think maybe the US and the UK establishment swap notes? Well, they're certainly to some extent working off the same script. And Leopard Thinks One says Sanders is Jewish. An attack on him as anti-Semitic would be difficult. It could easily be construed as anti-Semitic. Well, indeed, it could, but not if the entire media is all facing and pushing one way. Now, we have in Britain many important Jewish figures who are accused of being anti-Semitic, and some of them have been expelled from the Labour Party. Stephen Miller says Norman Finkelstein is a gale of light in an age of approaching darkness. He is indeed. And Robert K. Knight says, top show, we need to get those numbers up and get your word across. Robert, I've got to tell you, good news. The viewing figures are up 20% on last week already. How's that? And Dennis Collins says, Theresa May's illness was a cause for sympathy. Jeremy Corbyn's illness, an excuse for contempt. Let's hear from Sean on the line. Did I hear you're in Australia?
Yes, George. How are you doing, mate? You all right?
It's yourself, Sean. How happy I am to hear you. Go ahead. What time is it in Australia?
It's 5 o'clock in the morning. It's stupid o'clock.
Wow. Thank you so much for not just listening and watching, but calling. Go ahead, Sean.
No, hope you and the family going well, mate.
All going well, thank you.
I was just thinking about the famous Stalinist Jimmy Carter there. You know, he keeps getting pilloried, doesn't he?
He does, yes.
Absolutely. And it's the old the old self-hating Jew thing that they say, George, about Professor Finkelstein and people of the like.
Yeah.
And
In fact, Norman Finkelstein is the proudest person I know. He is absolutely vibrantly proud of his culture, his heritage, the sacrifice that his own parents made in the Holocaust. Anybody daring to call Professor Norman Finkelstein as an anti-Semite actually either is mad or very, very bad.
Well, you know what I found absolutely abhorrent, George? The fantastic, famous interview you did with Gerald Kaufman on Sputnik TV.
Yes, the late Sir Gerald Kaufman, yes.
His grandma was murdered in her bed
by the Nazis,
and he was still criticised. You know, it's outrageous. And you know, let's not forget that a shadow minister was filmed being off. You know, an Israeli, you know, someone from the Israeli embassy offering money for people to take people down. So that's actually
it's not entirely clear what the £1 million, for that's what it was for. But no one has come forward to explain what it was for. The Israeli embassy official, who was required to leave the country very soon afterwards, was filmed by Al Jazeera saying that they intended to bring down British political figures, including a minister, Sir Alan Duncan, the then Foreign Office Minister, but then the Minister for the Middle East. And this very same official says to a former now Labour MP, she's one of the breakaway to the Change group, where are they now? He tells her that the £1 million has arrived and it's in the embassy. But we never did get to hear what that £1 million was for.
Just changing tack, George, slightly.
Yeah.
I mean, he's made many mistakes as Jeremy. You know, he's been too quiet, as you say. He should have been on the front foot. But as you know, I follow the politics in the UK very, very closely, and I was astonished that the Times were the thing the Times published yesterday was outrageous. And what surprises me more than anything is the way it's been reported in the mainstream. In terms of it should have been absolutely nailed down as being a disgrace from all the other media. But some media are reporting it as if it's fact.
They're reporting it as if it's true. The aforementioned Daily Mail earlier reported it as if it was true. And this is a man, Corbyn, who beyond the age of 70 is cycling every day, running, climbing walls with, you know, these rock face type walls that people learn how to climb rocks and so on. He's up at like a rabbit across the field. He's running for planes and trains faster than his aides. The fact that he's now wearing specs at 70 is somehow prayed in aid as a reason for believing. I've been wearing specs since I was 50, and I couldn't climb that frame that he was climbing. I don't run for airplanes and trains in the way that he does. And I can't cycle. I certainly wouldn't cycle.
Can I put one point to you, George, as well? I've had a bit of a debate with a few people and on the left, and I'm a Brexit man. I'm a Lexit man. Yeah. But and not many people can answer me in terms of, you know, like the renationalisation of the railways, what's happening with British Steel at the moment, etc., etc. Like and people on the left, and like post Maastricht, how are we going to take back these things into public ownership whilst remaining in the EU? And not many people can answer me on that.
Well, that's because there is no answer. These are people who are living in Delors cuckoo land. They think that they think the EU in 2019 is the EU of Jacques Delors in 1990. But Maastricht, the single market, and the customs union that goes ineluctably along with it, changed everything. And the EU is now an unreformable, neoliberal austerity quasi-state. And, for example, it does not allow you to bring into public ownership services which the democratically elected government in the country decide ought to be in public ownership. You have to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to allow every service to be open to what they call competitive, compulsory tenders. And that means that a private businessman must have the right to underbid the public authority that is seeking to run those services. Sean, marvellous to hear from you at 5 o'clock in the morning. I hope you get a good nap after we go off the air. Mickey Fury says, Corbyn doesn't do himself any favours though, George. Well, that's saying something. I'll be right back.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold. By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us. From mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life, that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black Lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, and I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind. Color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik.
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
Well, the messages are flooding in, even on Twitter, but Elizabeth is monitoring the Facebook and the YouTube. How's that looking, Elizabeth?
Very interesting. On Facebook, we've had a bit of American politics experts emerged in the comment sections. He's going under the name of Joe Bloggs. I mentioned him earlier.
Oh, yes, you did, yeah.
Yeah, and he's been, a lot of people have asked, is he a politician? Someone's saying that he should be.
Maybe he's a candidate.
Yeah, and he's explaining, well, it's an anonymous account, so you never know, but he's using some fun analogies to explain American politics.
What sort of line is he taking? Is he disagreeing with what Casandra was saying earlier?
He's more going on trying to explain, I think a lot of maybe UK people don't necessarily understand as well as he does.
No, they don't, but by the time of the actual primaries, they will.
Yeah, they will know, yeah.
This is not a foreign story.
Yeah.
It's vitally important to people in Britain and everywhere who is running the United States of America, as we've been finding out.
Well, he's focusing a lot on the fact that actually, if you think about it as a game show where the contestant who's given the most money wins, is that a fair competition? So I think he's talking about where are people getting their funding.
Well, that didn't happen in the presidency because Hillary Clinton spent over $1 billion to lose.
Exactly.
She spent far more than Donald Trump did.
Yeah, someone who maybe you should get on the comment section.
He didn't put very much of his own money up either. Mind you, neither did she. But she got her money from all kinds of weird and wonderful places. So, of course, money's very, very important, but I don't think it's decisive.
You should get on the comment section and
tell
him
me,
that,
Now, which is busier, Facebook or YouTube?
So at the moment, Facebook, you're getting about 1 a minute, whereas YouTube, I can't keep up. There's tons and tons and tons. A lot of people have a lot of fun names, especially Corbyn seems to be getting a lot of traction on there. People are really commenting on, the Times Frail article.
Yes.
They say that he looks fit and healthy when he's digging in his allotment. That's flower power.
Of all the things they've ever said about him, Best.
I know.
That's the most
He's healthier than me, and I'm 23.
He's healthier than many people half his age.
Spirit in the Machine says Jeremy Corbyn should go against Boris in a bike race. Let's see who'd win.
Yeah, well, they are both cyclists.
I didn't know. Oh, yeah, of course, Boris
They
bikes.
are both cyclists.
Yeah, it'd be a tight race.
My money would be on Corbyn. But even more, why don't they have a race?
Yeah.
I mean, Corbyn could challenge Boris Johnson to a 5K, maybe?
5K, yeah. For charity.
For charity.
I'd definitely
Jeremy, if
that.
you're listening, watching, please, that's a winner, that one. Go on, Bess.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of people defending Chris Williamson, saying he's a proper, honest gentleman. Whenever we get someone honest, they get chased and targeted. So a lot of sympathy out for him. And then a couple of Ask Adams have been coming through as well.
Ask Adams up in the final hour.
In YouTube, a lot of questions on that. And that's pretty much it at the moment.
Well, if they're coming in that fast, you better get back to them now.
I know. I need to start getting them ready. Yeah, I don't understand them myself at the moment.
End of the show. Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
For all your hard work. Tweets coming in like Billy-O. Methy says, George, you saying denying the Holocaust should be a criminal offence. What about denying the Armenian genocide, denying the Nakba, denying the Holodomor, denying the genocide at Dresden and Nagasaki, Hiroshima? Should these be criminal offences too? He adds, or she adds, I completely agree about Jeremy Corbyn and Chris Williamson, though. They are the polar opposite of anti-Semites. And GOH says, it's amazing, George. You can't be any clearer on your opinions, and still they lie about you. Keep up the good fight. And Pablo says, the ones accusing others of being anti-Semites are as bad as actual, real anti-Semites. And Chase Flimkepa, Fleimkepa, Chase Flimkepa, says, what you say about Corbyn and the anti-Semitism is the most sensible thing anyone has probably said about the matter. Thank you. On Corbyn and anti-Semitism, so writing a foreword for the 2011 edition of J.A. Hobson's Imperialism, a study which clearly has anti-Semitic, old, ugly stereotypes, doesn't make him an anti-Semite? Well, as a matter of fact, he didn't write a foreword for it. So, good try, but no cigar. Peace, Unity and Hope says, George, you can't send people to jail for denying something. Zionists regularly say Palestine doesn't exist. Should we send them to jail? They also deny that Israel is a racist apartheid state. You just challenge lies with evidence. Here's the difference. 6 million Jewish people were systematically annihilated in the Holocaust. And, but for the Red Army, and but for the other allies, if the Nazis had stayed in power and in occupation of Europe, every last Jew in the European continent would have been annihilated. However bad all these other things that you've just bowled at me, and I can, with a bit of notice, deal with all of them, this crime was unique. I believe unique even over slavery, in that the purpose of slavery was to sweat and work the slaves. The purpose of the Holocaust was to literally, genocidally annihilate an entire group of people. Frederick Lawrence says, in a free society, all subjects should be allowed to be discussed. I researched this subject, and I sincerely think there are serious questions to be asked about the accepted version of events. I reckon you're just protecting yourself, George. And I reckon, Frederick, that there's something dark about you. You get what I'm saying? I speak the truth as I see it. Sally Jessett says, thank you, George. You are my anchor in stormy waters. You always support truth, regardless of the backlash you receive. Thank you, Sal. And Siodan says, on making denying the Holocaust a criminal offense, Zionism is a parallel reality in Hebrew. Nobody else thinks like Zionists, because Zionism is group trauma. Someone's on the line. Did I hear? In Lincolnshire, let's hear. Belinda.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on.
It's really so wonderful to hear your voice again.
Thank you. What I want to say is as far as the anti-Semitism problem that the Labour Party have at the moment is this. The Labour Party is in existence to stand up, I believe, for the working people of this country. And I don't believe ever before in my lifetime have we needed somebody to stand up for the working people. In this country, we have Jewish working people. I'm sure we have Israelis, and we have every nationality and every religion working in this country. We have people who are disabled, we have single parents, we have people desperately needing a Labour government to stand up for them and give them a little bit of help. Now, I would like to know what this part of the Labour Party, who are determined to stop us winning an election, to get a person like Jeremy Corbyn as our Prime Minister, who quite clearly will stand up for all the working people, whether they're Jewish or Muslim or anything else, any other religion, doesn't matter. The fact is, we need somebody like Corbyn, and the Labour Party seem determined to stop him becoming our Prime Minister. What are they doing in the Labour Party? What is more important, to stand up for people so that they can live a decent life, or to tear down the possibility of a Labour government because somebody makes up some story and anti-Semitic?
From their point of view, it's the latter. There are a significant number of Labour MPs who would rather not have a Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn with the kind of policies that he has showcased. And Tony Blair said so on television. He said so. I saw his lips move. He said...
Is it not more of a crime, though, to stop the Jewish Labour people, the Jewish working class people, having a decent standard of life?
Undoubtedly, but I don't believe it's about them. I believe this question is being used as a tool to undermine Corbyn. And Tony Blair was very clear on television. He said, it's not just that I don't think a programme like Jeremy Corbyn's couldn't win an election. It is that I don't want it to win an election. But, of course, 13 million Labour voters voted for it. It was the biggest increase in the Labour vote since 1945. Wonderful to hear your voice again. Yep. Unfortunately, the hour is against us. Don't be a stranger, Belinda. Dantom Long says, I've watched Bernie Sanders praising communist states and saying that people queuing for food off the state is a good thing. Well, I'd like to hear about that, Dantom Long. Why don't you send me the chapter and verse, send me the actualité. Show me Bernie Sanders' lips moving where he praises communist states and saying that people queuing for food off the state is a good thing. And if you do, I'll eat my hat. This hat, I will eat it live on television. And Unsociable Socialist says, this is a great show, George, watching on YouTube. Thank you very much indeed for all the very kind messages which are literally flooding in. The second hour is almost by, but the good news is there's still an hour to go, where I'll be joined by the cleverest man in England. Remember, if you've got a question, make sure you hashtag it, Ask Adam. That is on the Twitter, at George Galloway, at RTUK News, at RT News. However you're conveying your question, make sure that it's hashtagged Ask Adam. If you've got a video message, I really want to hear it. Send it now on Skype at GG MOATS because you've only got an hour left, and then that's me for another week. The audience is growing, I think I can say, fairly exponentially. So maybe one day we'll have more than one show a week. But for now, it's just these 3 hours every week. And this is completely unique. There is no other Open University of the airwaves, on the airwaves, anywhere. Never mind in the MSM, even anywhere else. Not on this scale, not with this professionalism, not with these talented people working with me through the glass, and, dare I say it, not with the experience age and wisdom of my good self. I'll be right back.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Hi, this is Max Kaiser. I'm here with Stacey Herbert, and we're doubling down.
Yeah, we're doubling down on crazy. We're doubling down on our new show called Double Down on Sputnik. It's doubling down on absolute joyous radio nirvana. You will love it. You will want to listen to every single episode on Sputnik. Bye, y'all.
Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
US President Donald Trump has met North Korea's chairman Kim Jong-un at the demilitarized zone today. President Trump made history by becoming the first president of the United States to have set foot in North Korea in decades after he shook hands with North Korea's Kim Jong-un over the demarcation line between the two Koreas. The two heads of state then stepped back into South Korea, where they were joined by South Korean President Moon Jae-in. Kim Jong-un continued by saying that Trump's entry into North Korean territory showed his willingness to strive for a better future, and that the wonderful ties with the US president enable us to overcome barriers, since their close relationship made it possible to arrange a meeting just overnight. The 50-minute impromptu meeting at the DMZ comes after previous negotiations earlier this year between Pyongyang and Washington ended in a deadlock after the US ultimately refused to offer North Korea any relief from economic sanctions that had been placed on the state. President Donald Trump has admitted that the US has treated Turkey in an unfair way over the S-400 missile system squabble, but blamed his predecessor Barack Obama for the situation. Asked whether Washington would sleep Ankara with sanctions for purchasing the S-400 instead, as US officials have repeatedly threatened, Trump said, "We're looking into it." Russia and Turkey penned a $2.5 billion contract on the delivery of 4 battalion sets worth of S-400s to Turkey in December 2017, nearly a year into Trump's presidency. In December 2018, the US cleared a $3.5 billion US Patriot missile deal for Turkey, but Ankara has yet to accept, saying that the term proposed by the US simply aren't as good as its deal with Russia. Turkish officials have said that they are still looking at buying the US systems, but not in place of their S-400s, which will be delivered in the start of July. The Northern Ireland Affairs Committee has revealed that the UK government has taken £17 million in taxes over the past 3 years from the £12 billion in Libyan assets linked to the country's late leader, Muammar Gaddafi. The UK's Democratic Unionist Party, or the DUP, demanded that the British government hand over the millions earned from the late Gaddafi's frozen UK assets to the victims of the IRA attacks. Nigel Dodds, the DUP deputy leader, disclosed to the Sunday Telegraph that the UK Treasury had taken £17 million in taxes in the past 3 years. The report claims that Gaddafi's government supplied weapons, including Semtex explosives, to the IRA during the violent conflict in Northern Ireland, known as the Troubles, and were used in bombings across the United Kingdom. The UK is not the only European country that's been embroiled in a Gaddafi assets relations controversy. In 2018, Belgian prosecutors launched an investigation into the billions of euros allegedly missing from Gaddafi's suspended accounts in local banks. And finally, the Syrian authorities have seized a collection of antiques in the city of Rastan as they continue clearing Homs province, the Syrian Arab news agency reports. According to the outlet, the terrorist group Daesh had prepared to smuggle the stolen artifacts abroad and kept them in a local house, but law enforcement was tipped off. The ancient items were reportedly to be handed over to the Homs Antiquities Department. The outlet cities and the officials from the Homs Museum of Baba Ali saying that the collection of 100 items contains several medium-sized jars, as well as a large storage container, an ancient lion sculpture, a bronze statue, stone pots, ceramics, ancient imprints, and including a piece with the pharaoh's inscription and an item dating back to the Ottoman Empire. Al-Ali pointed out that the findings include a collection of Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic coins. I'm Tamar Asfahani.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Well, the messages are coming in so fast we can't keep up with them. It's an absolute avalanche of terrific messages. There's one from Tony on Skype. Congratulations, George, on such a quick recovery. Actually, your new platform is much better. It was taking up to a week to get your programs on YouTube of late. Now I can listen live. No bad indeed. Much good. Ask Adam coming up.
Have something to say? Do you disagree with George? Then call us now and give us your view.
02077 982 255, that's the number, and the Skype address is @GGMOATS, that's GGMOATS, which, for those that haven't worked it out, means mother of all talk shows. We've got a Skype on the line now. Let's see and hear it, please. Who is it? At least I'm hoping there's someone there. Oh my goodness, it's Bill Bradshaw. It's Bill Bradshaw. It's no ordinary caller. Now listen, Bill, I'm sorry about last week. We just couldn't get round to it. So frantic was our first show, so busy. So please accept my apologies. And I will be with you at Planet Hollywood tomorrow for the launch, and I'm looking forward to it very much indeed. I've now read your estimable book, Bob Dylan at the Isle of Wight Festival 1969. So I know the answer to this question, but not everybody yet does. Tell us, how did Bob Dylan get tangled up in the Isle of Wight?
Yes, it's a good question, George, and the answer to that is it was simply by the sheer front and ambition of three young brothers on the island who decided that they wanted to do a pop festival in 1968, which they did. They managed to get a decent headline act in Jefferson Airplane, and they thought at the end of 1968 summer, how can we do better? And their solution to that was simply staring them in the face when one of the brothers bought another of the brothers a Bob Dylan album, John Wesley Harding.
I remember it well. I remember buying it at the time, actually.
That's it. And
I'll even tell you the price. It was 26 shillings and sixpence.
Oh, pre-decimal, wonderful.
It was pre-decimal, yes.
Yeah. And so they decided the biggest star in the world who would pack the people in on the Isle of Wight, get them over from the mainland, was the biggest draw in the world, Bob Dylan. And they had the ambition to ask the question, would you come out of what was, for Dylan at that time, semi-retirement in terms of performing, and play on the Isle of Wight?
He hadn't performed for, what, 3 years before that?
More than 3 years.
Really?
As you know, George, as a Dylan fan, I think that he'd had a motorcycle accident in New England, and the suggestion was that he'd actually broken his neck.
Yes.
And he didn't perform to any degree at all for the next 3 and a bit years. He did the odd TV show with Johnny Cash,
But no festival performances, no concert performances even for 3.5 years until he played at the Isle of Wight. And the amazing thing is, George, that the organisers, the Folk brothers, Ray, Bill and Ronnie Folk, had no idea that at the same time Woodstock was being organised under Bob Dylan's nose, virtually where he lived in New England.
But Dylan knew. He obviously didn't want to go to Woodstock.
No, he was. He felt affronted by the expectation by the Woodstock organisers, Michael Lang and co., that he would come out and play on his doorstep. And he said, no, you're invading my space. Woodstock at that time was a bit of a artistic recluse for writers, poets, painters. And he didn't like the invasion of his personal space, and he thought, no, I'm going to go and play on the Isle of Wight.
Do you think he even knew where the Isle of Wight was? Because even I would find difficulty putting a pin in the map.
Well, they made sure, the brothers made sure that he knew, because they sent him what at the time was a pretty sophisticated pack, if you like, an invitation to come and play on the Isle of Wight with all the details of the writers who'd made the Isle of Wight their home, such as Keats and various other people, and the delights of Osborne House. And this tickled Dylan, and they also threw in a holiday with a manor house and a governess for their children, for the Dylan children, and they took the bait.
Well, I mean, I've just watched, in fact, I've now watched it 3 times, the Rolling Thunder review on Netflix. Yes. And in that review, which toured the entire country and beyond in the end, he also went to, with all respect to Isle of Wight people, he also went to obscure places with that. Obscure in the sense that people were asking in the street, why has he come here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was an extraordinary coup to get Dylan to play, on this lump of rock in the middle of the English Channel. And therein lies the sense of ambition by the Folk brothers.
Fantastic, yeah. It's reaching for the stars, yeah.
If we want to sell out, if we want to drag people over this, the strip of water called the Soul and get a big crowd in, we need the biggest man, the biggest star in the world. And they did that, and they got 150,000 people, which at the time, in 1969, was the biggest festival in the UK.
Wow. 150,000 on the Isle of Wight. Now, I've got the book. I've got the book here. Yeah, there's only 100,000 people live there.
Yeah, that's right.
There obviously wasn't enough hotels or even camping places. What did people do?
Well, this is the thing. I think that because of the effort to get across to the island, it became the first camping festival.
Yeah.
And the organisers had the foresight to, acquire an extra field, which they decreed as the camping grounds. Okay. And they had bars and drinks. And it was the first camping festival in the UK.
Long before Glastonbury.
Before.
I'd rather have been at this one. It's an absolutely beautiful book, beautifully produced. The artwork, the photographs, absolutely terrific, Bill. It's a credit to you and everyone else involved. Now, 50 years on, you're remembering it with this special Isle of Wight festival this year. Tell us.
Yes, I'm also part of a group called All White Now. It's a pun, obviously, on the song of the time. But we're having a festival, a one-day festival called $1 Million Bash to honour the 1969 Bob Dylan Festival, and it's on Saturday, August the 31st. And tomorrow we're having a London media launch for the bash. And at the bash we will have some fine acts such as Richard Thompson, who's a folk rock legend, Wishbone Ash for the rockers.
Wow!
We've got Ashley Hutchings from Fairport Convention, who's putting together a Dylan-centric all-star folk rock band. We've also got well-known acts such as Julie Felix, The Pretty Things. Both of those acts played in 1969.
Wow.
And Julie...
They were far from pretty then. What do they look like now?
They're not so pretty these days, George. We've also got Jackie McShee's Pentangle, who are another act from the 69 bill as well. So we've got a really good cross-section. We've also got a fantastic young rising talent called Dina Walmsley, who was the runner-up in this year's series of The Voice on ITV.
Okay.
And she is a really, really talented young performer, and she's going to be actually singing a couple of songs at our press launch at Planet Hollywood in London tomorrow.
I'm looking forward to that. You wouldn't tell me if you had, but the thought occurs, would it not be worth a sneaky wee try to get Bob to come back for the 50th anniversary?
Wouldn't it be wonderful? We know he's playing, obviously, with Neil Young next month in Hyde Park, but he's aware of us. He is aware of us, and the door is wide open. We can't afford his normal rate, but if Bob wants to get in touch and even pop along and sing in the bar, we'd love to have him.
Well, he can send a video if he's watching now. He can send a video message, at least maybe play a few bars. The thing about Dylan is he's completely unpredictable, as this whole story shows.
Yeah.
He's as capable of performing every night as he is of not performing for years, because it was 3.5 years by the time he came out on the stage at the Isle of Wight. He hadn't been on a stage for 3.5 years, but he wasn't on another stage for some years after that.
You're right, George. He didn't play after the Isle of Wight in terms of a regular advertised concert performance by him. Didn't appear again for another 4 years. So the Isle of Wight Festival, it was this extraordinary island in a sort of barren sea of non-performing. He did the odd thing around about it. He did George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh, of course, when he came on stage and played a few songs. But in terms of Bob Dylan actually, having a concert performance anywhere, the Isle of Wight was the only one in 7 long years.
Well, look, as a man who loves Tangled Up in Blue, I'm glad he got tangled up in white at the Isle of Wight, and I wish the very best to the All White Now concert. August 31st, you say?
August the 31st, it's near Cowes, the County Showground on the Isle of Wight, and tickets are available on our website, allwhitenow.com.
And that's W-I-G-H-T.
That's W-I-G-H-T.
I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Bill. Many thanks indeed, and congratulations on a superb piece of work in the book. I'm really grateful that you signed a copy for me. See you tomorrow, Bill. Okay, it's tweets from Clara Mancia. What about, you can also not deny the ongoing racial cleansing of Palestinians and their Holocaust, or we can call you anti-Semite. The Palestinians being also Semites. But you can talk about the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. One of my good friends, the Israeli professor Ilan Pappé, has written a whole book about it. You might actually even have done it with Noam Chomsky, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. It's not a crime to state that the area that was Palestine has been ethnically cleansed. It's merely common sense. Valkyrie, too perfected, says, George, I disagree about criminalizing Holocaust denial. It's an attack against free speech and freedom of thought and expression. When the illegal terrorist entity that steals land by genocide... Now, look, I'm sorry. The Palestinian people have been subjected to an historic injustice. They have been cleared off their land. Their country has been wiped off the map. Hundreds of thousands, now millions, of their people have been scattered to the four corners of the earth. But they have not been subject to genocide. This is not a word that should be tossed around. Genocide means an attempt to literally annihilate Every last person in the group that you are talking about. Now, the injustice against the Palestinian people cannot be underestimated, but it must not be overstated. Otherwise, Israel would be building death camps in the West Bank and systematically annihilating Palestinians in it. They are not doing so. So for God's sake, stop saying that. Sean Alleman says half the people rounded up for denying the Holocaust haven't even done so per se. You can't question any of it, despite it being a massive and very complex genocide. And Veggie Cray, what a wonderful name, says, I'm really fed up of all this. His opinion should be banned, but mine is okay. Stuff that seems to be in fashion. Tolerance is needed by everybody. And Jack says, top show, top host, Truth Radio. I like to think so, Jack, and I'm glad you agree. It's the mother of all talk shows. You've got 40 minutes still to call me. Let's take a break.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Shooting from the lip.
We're taking no prisoners here. Real opinions for real people. Where we bring you people with controversial views, and instead of trying to catch them out, we actually let them expand on their views. What's going on in British politics, European politics, and indeed in world politics as well. And wherever you are, whether you're a UKIP supporter, a Tory or Labour, everything is in turmoil.
John Gaunt.
Shooting from the lip.
By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us, from mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life, that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality, to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black Lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, and I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind. Color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik. Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
Now, there's only 40 minutes, less than, left, and I want to ask Adam quite a few things, as do many of you. But let's take a Skype video message first. Let's go to that first.
Good evening, George.
Good evening.
From a very hot, sweltering south of France. This is just a wee message to suggest a documentary to your listeners and viewers called The Lobby, made by Al Jazeera, which gives you a very interesting and different point of view about the pressure that the Labour Party is under and members of the Labour Party are under concerning anti-Semitic views. And I highly recommend it, and I think all your viewers and listeners should check it out. Well done, by the way, on getting your new show. It's great seeing you and listening to you again. And here you go.
Thank you very much. What a beautiful, beautiful message. And of course, The Lobby is one of the most significant documentaries made in recent decades. Although, unless you listen to that message, if you listen to me, and if you watch a very small number of media outlets, will you know anything about it? It was scarcely reported when it was brought out, and very quickly swept aside, even by those that did report it at the time. The Lobby was an undercover documentary, exemplary in its professionalism, absolutely cleared by the state regulator of any anti-Semitism or other insults and smears that were thrown at it. It did capture some of the actuality we discussed earlier, and so there's no need to go back over that, but everyone should watch The Lobby. It is a four-parter, 2 parts about Britain, 2 parts about the United States. Now, the cleverest man in England has joined me. I'm very careful to say England because, well, I just got back from Scotland and there are very clever people there too. Adam Garrie, welcome back. Let me ask you this one first. Compamaros sends the tweet. The Holodomor, complete nonsense. Tell people what is the Holodomor.
Well, it depends on who you ask. In the early 1940s, particularly around 34, there was a Soviet famine. And the reason for that Soviet famine was that the creditors of the Soviet Union that needed to be paid back stopped refusing hard currency. And this left the USSR with little choice but to pay in grain. So when grain becomes currency rather than foodstuffs, it creates a famine, especially with all the other chaos and with the malfeasance going on, and so it was one part the fault of the creditors who put the USSR in a bind, and another fault of the USSR, not for anything ethnically or ethno-linguistically motivated, but simply poor management. But there is a strain of thought among Ukrainian nationalists who think that ethnic Ukrainians were specifically targeted for starvation during that famine. But when you look at the actual facts, there were people that were horribly affected by that very real famine in multiple parts of the Soviet Union, and almost all of the ethnic groups that comprise the very multicultural Soviet Union were affected. But this is one of the examples of people using history as a way to control the present rather than simply reflect on the past.
Now, at least one regular who's been following me a very long time is cross with you about your politics. I'm not sure where she gets off on trying to police other people's politics, or where she imagines she might get media that was less antipathetic to her point of view.
Quite.
I'm not sure that there is any in existence. But just tell us, I think she was upset because you're not a Labour supporter. But you've been clear from the beginning that you are not a socialist. Indeed, you are a centrist. No. But you just define centrism differently to the kind of charlatans who call themselves centrists in today's political spectrum.
Well, quite right, because centrism in its true essence, it means problem solving in a way that reflects the needs and the will of the majority while looking for ethical solutions to those with minority viewpoints and minority positions in society, particularly the economic minorities, which are just about the only minorities that we never hear about.
We never hear about
Speaking
them,
of which, everyone has a Pride Week, a History Month, etc. But there's no working class Pride Month. There's no working class history month. Why is it that the Great Reform Bill of 1867, which for the first time gave some working class men the right to vote, why isn't that commemorated the way that so many other events are? That's an aside. That's one of the many things.
It's a very important aside.
It is, and it's one of the big problems I have with identity politics, one of the many problems I have with it. But going back to centrism, centrism is not liberalism, and liberalism is not centrism. Unfortunately, a lot of the most virulent, extreme varieties of liberals in Europe, in North America, call themselves centrists when they're really not. Lee Kuan Yew was a centrist. Mahathir Mohamad was, and still is, at the age of 93, I believe he is now, indeed, a centrist. Deng Xiaoping, forgetting he was a communist in name, in many ways he was a centrist. And Ataturk, in many ways, was a centrist also. So when you look at the great centrist leaders, for me, it means getting things done without ideological baggage. And that's the antithesis of the liberalism masquerading behind so-called centrism that we see today.
Now, talking of regimes that last a long time, what did you make of Trump's walk across the DMZ today? I was very happy with it myself.
Well, I woke up quite early on a Sunday to see it, knowing that something was going to happen that was going to be interesting. And I have to say, tears of joy literally burnt my eyes when I was watching that, because the war in Korea, the forgotten war as it's known in the United States, but it was in its own microcosmic way more deadly in terms of the firepower, the quality of the firepower being used than the Second World War. All of Pyongyang, every city in North Korea was destroyed. Thousands upon thousands of men, young men, sent to their graves on all sides, needlessly, to keep a sane people, a homogenous people, living on a medium-sized peninsula apart. And to now see the leader of South Korea, the President of the United States, and the chairman of the DPRK of North Korea, all standing in the truce village, smiling, and to see the President of the United States walking into the DPRK beside a smiling Kim Jong-un, I honestly think that the people who don't have a recollection of that forgotten war have underestimated the weight of this occasion. This is a moment on par with the events that set in motion the crumbling of the Berlin Wall. And as I've said before, I'm more convinced now than ever before, there will be peace in Korea, there will be cooperation between North and South, there is no going back, no more than there's any chance that the Berlin Wall will be re-erected.
A lot of critics have emerged, most of them playing party politics, but some of them in the Republican Party also. Overwhelming criticism in the US media, which is of course controlled by people who are, I think, irreconcilably hostile to President Trump. So he took a big risk doing it. He takes a lot of big risks. Yes. Why does he do that?
Well, all three of those leaders that were there today are men of destiny. Moon Jae-in was a man of peace who had his election literally, and it's all in the open now, literally stolen from him in 2012 by the South Korean version of the CIA, so they could put in Park Geun-hye, the son of the daughter of Park Chung-hee.
That ended well.
She's in prison.
Larceny in prison.
Quite right. And so Moon was a man who held fast, and in 2018, the man of peace got in, and the woman of war is in prison. Donald Trump, whatever one might think of him, is a man of destiny. He changed the way American leadership looks, speaks, acts, and his levels of unpredictability, the organized chaos, what portion is organized, what portion is chaos, maybe we'll never know. He's a man of destiny. He defeated the Clinton war machine, which is in many ways the most justified victory an American president has had since 1945. And finally, there's Kim Jong-un, the youngest ever head of state to take over a nuclear-armed nation, one of the youngest men to ever become a head of state in the modern age. And he was someone who he came onto the scene wrapped in mystery, a riddle inside the enigma and the rest of it. And now he's a man that is giving answers to the press at press conferences. He's a man who's being described by the South Koreans as humorous and self-deprecating. And most importantly, he's a man making speeches about artificial intelligence, about economic reform, about peace rather than hostility with the former enemies of his country. All three of these men were men of destiny, and that little walk, only a few feet though it was truly one small step for Trump and Kim, but one giant leap for world peace.
That's a good point. To take a break.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us, from mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality, to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black Lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, and I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind. Color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik.
Tune in every Monday to Loud and Clear with Brian Becker for our regular segment, Education for Liberation with Bill Ayers, where we take a look at the state of education across the country. What's happening in our schools, colleges, and universities, and what impact does it have on the world around us? Our resident expert is Bill Ayers, the legendary activist, educator, and author. Tune in to Loud and Clear this Monday and every Monday for Education for Liberation with Bill Ayers.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
The mother of all talk shows is back. Unleashed, unabridged, uncensored, and unbelievable. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
Well, Ask Adam is in full flow, but there's so little time, so much to ask him. Joe Public asks a good question, but before I give it to you, let me just paint the backdrop. Theresa May met President Putin at the G20. She contrived to be as graceless as was humanly, physically possible. As someone wrote, she had a face on that someone would have if their blind date turned out to be something of a disappointment. It was the sink, the pits of lack of diplomacy. And I don't know if President Putin was too polite to ask her, but let me ask you, as Joe Public is asking, where are the Skripals? Because if I was President Putin and saw the way she was behaving, I'd have said, by the way, Yulia Skripal is a Russian citizen. Where is she? I demand that you tell me.
Well, before we get to them, the short answer is no one, at least no one who can say, is willing to say, and I certainly don't know where they are. But getting back to the disappointment that was Theresa May at the G20, she had one thing to do. You had one bloody job, and that was when she's in a room with the president of the US, with the president of China, the prime minister of Japan, the prime minister of India, president of Turkey, president of Russia. You're supposed to be doing trade deals with these people. You're supposed to be setting the preliminary stage for post-Brexit FTAs. And what did she do instead? She scowled and hectored Putin like a curmudgeonly schoolmistress, and then she did a smiling photo op with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, whom public opinion in Britain is somewhat turning against, so it wasn't a very good look either way. And so the two countries that actually have the least potential to do a fully fledged free trade deal with Britain, she spoke to, and the countries that want to do an FTA, the countries that should, the countries that could, maybe she poured sugar in their tea or something like that, to stick with the schoolmistress metaphor, but she really blew it. She had one job and she failed.
She's generally failed at most jobs that she has had. Let's take some callers then, right up to the end of the hour. Next caller, please. Unfortunately, the baton was dropped there. Pat Brannigan says, I'm still a bit confused about British politics. Williamson is suspended from the party. Does that mean he cannot stand for election as an independent? Well, of course he can stand as an independent, but he was elected relatively narrowly as a Labour MP. He hasn't, from my point of view, and from Kevin Marr's point of view, adumbrated earlier, done anything that justifies being pushed out of the Labour Party. Why should he stand as an independent? Have we got that caller? Yes, hello, caller.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead. The whole world is listening.
Hello?
Yes, go on, speak up. Is that... It's not who I think it is.
I think
it's
I know
the
who it
legend
is.
that is Norma. Can she be properly introduced, please? Don't put a legend through to me without announcing her in advance. This is the legend, Norma from Bristol. Norma, welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, the whole world's listening to you. Go ahead.
Oh, it's echoing terribly.
It's beautiful. Your voice sounds exactly...
Come on.
Norma, it's quintessential Norma. Go ahead, Norma.
Hello, George. Hello, Adam.
Hi, Norma. Good to hear from you.
I'm still alive.
Well, we're all very happy about that.
It's just a couple of things, actually. One is about Jeremy Corbyn. I'm so sorry he's been treated so badly, even by his own party.
Especially by his own party.
Yeah, I know.
None of the rest of it would be possible if it was not for the people in his own party. Go on.
I know. The other thing is about... There's a big echo on this phone, George.
No, it's perfect. Believe me.
It was not for me.
Go ahead.
Anyway, Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
I'm afraid he's got no character.
He's got a lot of... Let's be fair, Norma. He's got a lot of character. He's not short of character. He may be short of ethics. He may be short of credibility, but he's a real character.
Oh, he is, yes. But the actual... not going into all the details of Boris's private life.
No, we should avoid that.
Yeah, but his record in the past with relationships isn't good. And, you know, these posh boys...
Neither has Jeremy Corbyn's relationship with relationships
but I
in
don't
the past.
think Jeremy
That's one of the reasons why it's not good to go there.
No.
Maybe not, but these posh boys, I think, don't respect women. I really don't. However, we'll leave that one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the echo.
Well, let me ask Adam to reply to your first point, which was that Corbyn is being treated unfairly and that Boris Johnson is, who is almost certainly our next Prime Minister, is a man, shall we say, wanting on one or two fronts.
Well, the thing with Boris Johnson is that he's got a big monkey on his back, and it's not ex-wives, it's not Michael Gove and his delivery assistants. It's the Brexit Party, who today unveiled what in this day and age sort of counts as a manifesto. They revealed some of their policies beyond Brexit, beyond a free trade deal. They were very centrist policies. They were policies, frankly, that I would find it hard to imagine that anyone could oppose them. One, Nigel Farage said broadband and good high-speed mobile connectivity is as much of a right as clean running water. He wants to scrap the expensive David Cameron vanity project, which was high-speed rail 2, and invest money in the Midlands, in Wales, in the north of England, in places outside of London that have been neglected. He wants to cut student debt. He wants to put money back into developing infrastructure. There was someone even online who said, this sounds almost like a Tony Benn speech. So Boris Johnson needs to realise that if he doesn't deliver Brexit on the 31st of October, and if he doesn't do what, to quote Nigel Farage, cross the demilitarised zone and speak to the Brexit Party, I think that both Labour and the Tories are going to have a huge problem, and it's not coming from Jeremy Hunt, it's not coming from Israel or Palestine, it's coming from Nigel Farage.
Norma, last word to you.
Yeah, Joe, just quickly, the other point was this Glastonbury Festival with Michael Leavis. supporting CND. Caroline Lucas gave a speech today on the pyramid stage on scrapping Trident, and it had a brilliant response from all the people there.
Well, I'm very glad to hear it. Are you telling me that you had your wellies on and you were at the pyramid tent at Glastonbury?
No, my son is, but I'm
Excellent.
not now.
Wonderful.
I got it on my Twitter.
Excellent. Norma, thanks. You're a legend always. Thanks very much for calling us. Many people, and I mean many, are very happy to hear your voice again. Let's take our last but quick break.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines, we divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today, get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@SputnikNews.com.
Well, Adam Raven has said, new kid on the block is the Brexit Party UK, breathing down the neck of Labour and the Conservatives. Phenomenal rally today. I haven't actually seen the footage, but it looked like it was boiling up to being a big event. They've definitely got the ball at their feet, don't they?
Absolutely. And while Corbyn is busily staying fit, digging his own political grave, and while Boris Johnson is dodging Jeremy Hunt, a bit like ex-husbands and ex-wives might dodge each other in a dodgy pot of Camberwell, the Brexit Party is looking like the most united party. It's the only party that really either has a leader or has confidence in a leader. It does what it wants to say on the tin, and it has, in an age where everyone's offended by everything, none of the policies and none of the major statements coming from the major figures have managed to offend anyone. That must be an Olympic record in this day and age. People can't even brush their teeth without offending someone in the year 2019. And the Brexit Party, which was supposed to be so offensive to mainstream so-called ultra-liberal opinion, it really hasn't put a foot wrong.
But what about if Farage makes an electoral deal with Boris Johnson to keep Boris Johnson in Downing Street for a full term? That would be pretty offensive to a very large number of people.
And it would only be one person's fault. Jeremy Corbyn is a man I respect because he is a Brexiteer, not in terms of what he said in 2016, but in terms of what he said the 25 years prior to that. And if Jeremy Corbyn was to say, we are the party of Brexit and we're also the party of the working people, he would steamroll over a broken, miserable Tory party, and he'd frankly give the Brexit Party a run for its money if he phrased his policies in that term. But because Labour's becoming a policy of the anti-democratic Remain side, basically a less organised version of the Liberal Democrats, if you can believe that, we're getting to a stage where we might have a repeat of the 1918 coupon election, whereby in 1918 a Liberal Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, was propped up in a leadership position by a surging Conservative Party, and special endorsements that Lord Asquith quite negatively called coupons were given to the candidates endorsed by the national government, the wartime coalition government, as it was called. I think what could happen if the stars align and if Britain doesn't leave by the 31st, or indeed if there's an election called in October or November, we could see a coupon election whereby Nigel Farage plays kingmaker and says, right, we're endorsing the Tory in this constituency because he's pro-Brexit, and we're going to stand in this constituency. You stand down if you want us to combine forces with you and keep Boris Johnson in power. That may well happen, but it's only Corbyn's fault because Brexit is a winning ticket. If all three main parties, and the three big ones now are Tory, Labour and Brexit Party, if all three of them were pro-Brexit, it would be a level playing field and one would be forced to talk about the other issues that the parties stand for. But because there's this consternation about respecting the democratic referendum of 2016, it's frankly only going to be about Brexit. A lot of people are going to have a rude awakening.
I think that's why Kevin Marr was accentuating how soon the election might be.
Yes.
Because the 31st of October is just around the corner in political terms. And either we come out on the 31st or Europe makes it impossible for us to come out on the 31st, in which case Prime Minister Boris Johnson needs a mandate for what he's going to do next. And he could get that with the alliance. Let's take a caller. Yes, who's on the line?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the line. You're talking to the whole world. Go ahead.
Oh, that's wonderful. I did actually call you before, George. That was back in 2016. And it was just after not George Galloway, Trump took the office.
Yes, as I predicted. As I predicted he would.
Yes, and I went on about driverless cars and saying how it was a great time for him to take the office and how all this technology was going to happen, and it kind of hasn't happened in the last 4 years. But now there's a candidate on the scene, Andrew Yang, who it seems like could be this sort of new candidate, the sort of thing that I thought Trump might be and really wasn't. And so I wanted to ask Andrew Garrie a question, if that's all right.
Rohan, thanks for that call. That's Rohan in Huddersfield. Now, Adam, I did signpost earlier that you were, I think, the first British supporter of Andrew Yang. Respond to Rohan and tell me how you think he's doing.
Well, first of all, I think Trump is going to win in 2020, but I think and I hope that Andrew Yang isn't going away. Now, for those people in the States, in Britain and everywhere else who might not know who he is, he's a candidate who said openly he's more or less an independent, but to give himself a shot, he's standing in the Democratic primary. His main calling card is that artificial intelligence and robotics already has taken many manufacturing jobs. Next, it's going to take transport jobs, including truck drivers in American, lorry drivers in British, but the jobs will be taken by robots in both countries, slowly but surely. And then this AI technology will even come after legal assistants, low-level solicitors, and this is going to change the very nature of the workforce.
I've had a few robotic solicitors, actually.
Well, there are quite a few robotic I mean, look at Theresa May. She may well be the most successful.
First AI Prime Minister.
So, rubbish human Prime Minister, excellent AI.
But is he too good for politics in the sense that, electoral politics, I mean, because, you know, to complain that your microphone wasn't so good and
you've just got to shout louder.
The format doesn't really suit you. It's a bit like the ship's captain complaining about the sea, isn't it?
There's a bit of that, and there is a feeling that he's almost too straightforward, too honest, and don't get me wrong, I love those qualities, but if you're honest and straightforward, you've also got to be a boxer. Muhammad Ali was very, very honest, but if you called him a liar, he knew what to do about it. And Yang, let's give him time. The format itself was quite rubbish, and social media is far more important in many ways than these old legacy medias. Donald Trump already proved that, and I think the fact that Yang is striking a moderate tone, saying let's end the zero-sum attitude of saying, oh, because we have a disagreement, we can't be friends, we can't stand next to each other, we can't shake hands or have a discussion. He's totally rejected this, frankly, marching drum of proto-fascism that's sweeping in, saying that people in a civilized society can't discuss things. As I said when talking about Europe, call me old-fashioned, I prefer prefer Magna Carta to Mein Kampf. And Yang is someone who is very open to talking to everyone. We're all in the same boat mentality is very much part of Andrew Yang's run. I think that the more people hear about him, the more they'll like him. But because he doesn't fit the mold that the corporate media and the old Hillary machine that still has a few of its cylinders running, because they don't want to push him, he will be silenced, so he's got to speak up.
Rohan, what do you think? We've lost Rohan. We did talk earlier to Casandra Fairbanks about Yang. She thought that he did quite well on social media.
Yes.
As you say, not the legacy media.
And one thing I like about, I would call her a centrist too in many ways. I don't know if she'd take that as a compliment, but I follow her. She's certainly not into the dogma that's really imprisoning American politics.
Yeah, I mean, what's left, what's right is, of course, a moot point in many respects.
Yes.
See, for me, if you're pro-EU, pro-NATO, you're not left.
Quite right.
But most of the people that are pro-EU think of themselves as left. Equally, if you are against the EU and against NATO and against foreign wars, I can't accept that that means you're right-wing. Right and left are blurring, without a doubt. I've been saying that for some years.
The Reds are tangled up in blue, to get back to the Dylan.
Reds are tangled up in blue. Brilliant. I wish I'd said that. Dakota says, listening to George Galloway and Sputnik International with his guest, would love to ask him who, currently in the race to succeed May, would be able to make a branch of peace towards North Korea the same way that Trump has. Hashtag Ask Adam. I suspect the answer to that is none. I mean, if Hillary Clinton had been the president, I think we'd already be at war in Syria, in Iran, and maybe even in Korea too.
It's highly likely, as the kids like to say. I mean, Hillary Clinton was
the Prime Minister likes to say.
No, Hillary Clinton was a monstrosity waiting to happen. A cold viciousness that, you know, worse than AI, because AI doesn't have negative emotions, it's supposed to be neutral. But I think a lot of people, whether you like or dislike Trump, and lots of people blow hot and cold on Trump, we all do, it's inevitable. I think that people, maybe in a few years, will start to realize the size of the bullet that the world dodged when Hillary lost that election. And I agree, all of those potential fronts of war are potential places she could have dropped more bombs, and that, of course, would have been horrific.
And you seem very certain that Trump will be re-elected. There'll be a lot of people in the US disappointed to hear that. Just explain why.
I think, first of all, there's too many Democrats and people are getting electoral fatigue over a year before the vote. Secondly, I think that in terms of social policy and in terms of the way they convey their social policy, they've gone so far to this identitarian liberal extreme that they're offending and alienating middle America. So whatever Trump does to offend people like Rosie O'Donnell and the Prime Minister of Canada and the rest of it, they're not the people that get to vote ultimately. It's middle America, especially the Rust Belt, where elections are swung. And I think this identitarian agenda, it's so off-putting. It's almost as though to go to one of these Democratic debates, you have to look at yourself in the mirror. Do I have the right clothes on, the right skin color, the right... I just want to get back to we're all human beings. We all have rights. We all need to, and at least should, engage in the political debate. That's not necessarily Trump's language. He talks about winners and losers, but hey, at least there's only two of them. There's about 30 different varieties of identities that the Democrats are talking about, and people, I think, are going to get fed up.
Who do you think they're going to pick?
Probably Biden, but he's competing with Jeremy Corbyn for digging his political grave, and unlike Corbyn, who's a man of principles, Biden is an opportunist who hasn't got many opportunities.
He has principles, but if you don't like them, he has others.
He should run for the Tory leadership.
It's his to lose, but I think he's going to lose it. Right at this moment, my guess would be that Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris will be
very, very good guesses. Yeah.
I prefer Bernie Sanders. There are others, but they're not really going to win, and if they did win, they probably wouldn't win the presidency.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. We're going to follow it right through the primary season and all the way up to the presidential election, and I hope that you'll be with us. Adam, Garrie, of Eurasia Future, the cleverest man in England. Hashtag Ask Adam. That's it, I'm afraid, for the show this evening. It's been marvellous for me. I hope it was for you. And if it was, come back next week at the same time and bring another viewer, another listener with you. You can follow me on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram, even on Snapchat, and of course on my own video channel. Goodbye for now.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold. By Any Means Necessary is your guide to the movement and efforts shaping the world around us, from mass incarceration.
No longer am I interested in or concerned with prison reform. I am interested only in the eradication of prisons.
To the battle between police and water protectors.
It was a pretty punishing disregard for the sanctity of human life that unleashing water cannons on peaceful, prayerful water protectors.
From efforts to protect the environment.
The climate movement is ready to, with plenty of opposition research and force and strength, along with, the right of both science and morality, to fight them on this.
To the movement for Black Lives.
When I first saw the Michael Brown video, and I saw that it clearly contradicted the narrative put forth by the Ferguson Police Department and by police supporters in general, 3 words came to mind. Color me shocked.
Stay tuned to By Any Means Necessary, 5 days a week here on Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.